somewhere towards the end of the agenda and you wish to get out of here, you're more than welcome to ask your question or make your statement at the beginning of the meeting, and we will still consider it in relation to that item. So I hope that makes sense. I have quite a long list of people. I'm going to work through the people who I understand are here to ask general questions and speak on general matters. But if there are people at the end of that who did want to speak in this part of the meeting, then I'll let you let me know and you can come up. So the first person I had for public question time was Brenton Buchanan on a question not on the agenda. So Brenton will show you how. He's going to come up to the microphone. He's going to press the button on the right. And you've got a 3-minute time limit. So when you hear the little beeper go off, that tells you your 3 minutes.
3 minutes?
3 minutes.
Okay.
You don't have to use them all.
All right, no problem. I'll use them. Look, thank you very much for the opportunity to address you and the executive. I have put forward a paper which is to do with the Fremantle Park Centre and the reconstitution of 2 hardcourt tennis courts which are immediately north of the facility. Now, I understand the council have approved funding for that and it's yet to occur. What I'm putting forward is there's an opportunity now to change the business model for the Fremantle Park Centre, and it involves the installation of 2 padel courts or paddle courts, which is the European game, which is similar to squash in certain characteristics, and up to 4 pickleball courts, which is the fastest growing small racquetball game in the United States. The Fremantle Park Centre, as I understand it, and as media reports would indicate, is having trouble making ends meet. I'm putting it to the council that if we invest money into the same old, we will get the same result. There's no chance that this is a bankable notion, putting money back in the same way into that business. Just to describe paddleball and pickleball, paddle's got hard courts at the back. It's played like a semi-squash type of game on a very intimate half-size tennis court. Whereas pickleball is more like a mini court and probably table tennisy in certain characteristics with an aerated ball. My preliminary modelling, because these courts are available at Melville Recreation Centre and Tennis Centre, I've modelled it up. Now, look, you know, I don't have all the information, obviously, but it will be available, this information. But I'm estimating that Melville are probably making in the vicinity of $650,000 to $750,000 a year in court hire. So it's a highly prospective business model that I think should be looked at. Basically, I think that if we don't aim to broaden the client base of the Fremantle Park Centre, the Fremantle Park Centre will continue to come to council for funding, and that is unsustainable. In the Arts Centre precinct, as our councillors are aware, we have a number of other things we'd like money put into, like pavements and other matters, tree canopy. We would like to see a sustainable business, and that's why I put it forward to the council to cease anything to do with restitution of the tennis courts and have a serious look at this model, which I've modelled up and I'm more than happy to distribute through the appropriate channel. Thank you.
Thank you, and very good timing. I guess I'll just respond by saying you did send through some information, but if there's more information you want to send through, we're happy to share that with Fremantle Park and with the relevant officer. And I hope you've tried the pickleball out at Sampson Rec. So,
no, I haven't, but I know that Graham Tattersall's going to play padel on the weekend with his son, so he'll give you the full.
There you go, insider knowledge. Thank you.
How do I communicate with you guys? Like, do I go through Marie?
Members at Fremantle.
Okay.
You'll get everyone. Thank you. Okay. So I will now work through the sign-in sheets, and there's some people who are here for things not on the agenda. So we'll start with Lynn Wicks.
Right, thank you. My questions are about the West End Easter markets. Thank you for the responses to my questions asked on February the 28th. Councillor's response to my first question asked at the last meeting did not explain why this 7-year highly successful event was cancelled. It only explained what Council would like to do now and in the future. Why cancel an event that has been so successful? That's the main question. Would Council please itemise the key factors which led to the cancellation of the markets for 2024? Would Council please also provide the data that supports these key factors? And would Council please provide the data collated on Council's 2 visits to the high street businesses in the last month, seeking further feedback about the cancellation, gauging interest in the 2024 event, and businesses taking up the city's offer of extended trading permits. In the last 7 years, Council fully supported the event, and I believe that there was good communication between the Council representative and Rowena Mitchell from the Artisan Store, who was the organiser of the markets. Thank you for that. This year, did anyone from Council engage face-to-face with Rowena Mitchell to talk to her about the event cancellation and reasons for it before it was cancelled, and work on a solution with her to promote business along High Street on the Easter weekend 2024 so that it is fair and equal for all businesses and so that it is a win-win outcome for everyone? Surely it is vitally important for there to be good communication between Council and business owners.
Great boost to high street traders. Many others have echoed this sentiment, saying, we can't open now, we won't open now because we will lose money. If we do, because the street will be closed and we will have to pay long weekend wages. We can't afford to open over the Easter weekend without the market going ahead. I'm presenting this information hoping that you will reconsider your decision. Thank you. And I would like my answers on notice to my email address. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, Rowena Mitchell.
I want to continue on with the West End Weekender. I've got the details of the petitions we've carried out over the last 2 weeks since the last council meeting, when we were told that there was no business interest in having this market proceed. We've had surveys done. We've got 47 businesses who want the market to go ahead. And we've also got a community petition going where we've got 291 and growing responses saying that they want this market to proceed. We were also told that many of the businesses had applied for ETPs. We surveyed the businesses, only one business has applied for an ETP. So the information we received from council is totally contrary to all the surveyed information we've received on High Street. And to move forward from this point, I'd like to know who the individuals were that were responsible for deciding to cancel the West End Weekender. And then can we meet with these decision makers to have a conversation about the West End Weekender? And my third question that wasn't answered from the last meeting was, how do we get the West End Weekender reinstated?
Thank you. Natalia Bossanova.
Hello. Nice to see you all here again. So that's my third council meeting in a row, which means the question about West End markets, yes, it's again about it, has been up for 6 weeks already. So 6 weeks, it's quite a long period of time. Actually, for me personally, it was quite an interesting experience because for the past 6 weeks, I met so many wonderful people. I knew my local community much, much better. And I had an opportunity to see how council work and how things processing here, which was really interesting. So thank you very much for this opportunity for me. But even if I didn't show you all my nice dresses yet, I think that it's time to kind of stop these games, because what I see that both you, council, and us, businesses, waste quite a lot of time and human resources for almost nothing. And all I can see, it's like growing misunderstanding between two sides. And I think the reason of this misunderstanding, it grows all from lack of
elected members. Number 4, in relation to the officer's recommendation to confirm the minutes dated the 28th of February, state on what grounds the officer is justified in recommending these minutes be confirmed when in fact the heading and a question that I presented were re-edited and recorded incorrectly and in error. Also, some 250 words, the entire context in relation to my questions in regard to Victoria Hall were excluded from the minutes. And there is no record in the minutes that the live streaming was turned off during mine and other people's presentation. And acceptance of minutes and consideration of motions from the AGME as presented in the minutes is false, as in fact it was a mere utterance of includes 19 without naming the item tagged on the en bloc voting. The outcome of the motion of the receival of the annual report remains unresolved and excluded as a motion from the current minutes. Thank you. And your windows are still dirty.
And Helen Cox.
Good evening. My name is Helen Cox and I'm a resident of 161 Edmund Street, Beaconsfield. My question is for the Fremantle CEO or acting CEO, Mr. Hanna. And if I could please have a verbal response to my question in chamber. In Australia, we understand the reference meaning of the question, does it pass the pub test? I refer you to the Local Government Act 5.26, Electors Meeting 5.27, 5.28, Special Electors Meeting, and 5.33, Minutes of Electors Meetings. Clearly, there are different explanations of how the Local Government Act is interpreted by you, the Acting CEO, the Mayor, Ms Fitzharding, and councillors. Questions and motions presented by electors were recorded and minuted in error and managed with a council officer's response catchphrase, no further action required. During the last council meeting, any reference to the annual general electors meeting was noted with number 19, no name or title, and subsequently voted upon by councillors and Mayor Fitzharding en bloc. Clearly, number 19 is electors' lucky number. Are these actions considered to be appropriate and do they pass the pub test by employees acting in good faith on behalf of the Fremantle City Council? I personally would like an explanation of why the council in general did not respond to those motions and questions in discussion in council chamber. Because to me, considering the amount of time and effort that electors put into presenting their questions for an annual general meeting, hoping for some action or response that would make a difference to the community in Fremantle, for it to be considered by a number 19 without even reference to the annual general meeting is dismissive and, quite frankly, disrespectful, considering a lot of the questions that we asked at the annual general meeting were in reference to finances, which many people in Fremantle are very concerned about. So could you please give me an answer as to why it was en bloc was used without reference to the annual general meeting and why they weren't discussed in chamber?
I am going to take the detail of your question on notice, so if you can submit
But
that,
I
that
did
would be
ask,
great.
I mean,
Excuse me,
en bloc.
Excuse me. Just to be clear, when you finish speaking, you will allow me to speak. So, a decision to move things en bloc is a decision of the council, not of the officers. And what it says is that we accept the officer's recommendation in that particular item. So that's our decision as a council. It's nothing to do with the officers. It's completely in accordance with the Act. So when we choose to do that, we do that as a council by vote. What it means, it doesn't mean we're dismissing it. It means we have read that, we're obliged to read everything before we come in here, and we agree with the officer's recommendation. We don't have anything further to add or change. So that's our decision as a council. Thank you.
No,
no,
it's all very well. It's all very well for you to dismiss me. My question was directed to the CEO.
That's
not to you.
This is my meeting. So
well, it may be your meeting, but my question is for the CEO
Ellen, I'll
to answer.
be very clear with you. This is my meeting. If I wish an officer to make comment, I will. But I will tell you now that an en bloc decision is not the decision of a CEO or any officer. It's a decision of the elected council.
Well, maybe
so. Thank you.
Maybe the council could answer that question then. Maybe I need to change who I'm directing my question to.
I have answered the question. Stacey Towns is our next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you for your consideration and thank you for your direction.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Nice to see you all again. An extract from the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of February 2024 states from the Council Officers' Reports. While LPP 2.23 now requires any nomination for inclusion of a tree on the register to be authorised by the owners of the land on which the tree is located, LPP 2.23 had not come into effect when the trees from the heritage list were added to the register, meaning that they were not required to be authorised by the landowners. In a meeting held in your office, Mayor, on the 27th of the 2nd, 24, between yourself, the CEO, Director of Planning, Danielle Catalini, and myself, the Director of Planning stated this also. Can the Mayor please advise if the above statement by the Council Officer and used by the Director of Planning is correct? Can the Mayor also advise by what mechanism the tree at 195 High Street was placed on the significant tree register prior to the adoption of LPP 2.23 on the 27th of the 2nd, 2019, if this is correct? And can the Mayor please also advise the date the Moreton Bay fig tree located at 195 High Street was placed on the significant tree register? LPS 4.2 clearly states, in considering a proposal to include a tree on the register of significant trees, the Council shall notify in writing the owner and occupier of the place where the tree is located and provide them with a copy of the description referred to in clause 4.1 and for the reason for the proposed entry. Can the Mayor advise if community engagement was carried out by the City through its officers or any other means with regard to LPP 2.23 between the 16th of November 2018 and the 4th of December 2018, and whether it met all the requirements of LPS 4 Clause 13A? Can the Mayor advise if all the occupiers of 195 High Street were contacted by the City through its officers or any other means as prescribed in LPS 4 Clause 13A during the community engagement period for LPP 2.23 carried out between the 6th of November 2018 and the 4th of December 2018? If the Mayor can confirm this, that all the occupiers were contacted by the City through its officers or any other means, can the Mayor please provide evidence of this contact? Can the Mayor also advise if the occupiers of 19 High Street were given notice by the City through its officers or any other means of adoption of the resolution SPD 1902-3 as passed on the 27th of February 2019? If the Mayor can confirm this, can the Mayor please provide evidence of this? Thank you.
Thank you. Tony will take those ones on notice. Thanks. Okay. I don't have anyone else listed to speak in general business, but if there are other people here for other items, Ian Kerr, I can see you would like to come up now. You are welcome to come up now. Yep. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. At the previous council meeting, I asked 3 questions about the South Beach toilets and change rooms. However, I'm very disappointed that the first and most important question has not been answered. So I asked the question again. What changes were made in January 23, and hence to the tenders advertised in October 2023, to the schematic design presented to Council on 26th of October 2022? And then what further changes were made in the revised tenders that closed in February 2024? I also wish to speak to an item that is on the agenda, which is item C2403-4, which is the proposed construction of additional car parking at the South Fremantle Marketplace Shopping Centre. Now, I have emailed all elected members with my concerns about this proposal, so I will assume they've read my email and will not repeat the details here. However, I believe it is important to have on the record my concerns as a transport planning professional and a local government councillor for 14 years, that the presentation and assessment of the proposal does not meet the standard required for council to approve it. Basically, it appears to assume that there will actually be no increase in traffic accessing the shopping.
Good evening, councillors and staff. Thanks for the opportunity to be able to speak tonight. So I'm the architect for 82 Watkins Street, and I just wanted to put a little bit of history behind the original development. So at the time that the western neighbours, so the issue I really want to address is the overheight wall between 80 Watkins, the western neighbour, and 82. So I understand at the time that at 80 Watkins was approved for development, they also owned 82 Watkins Street, and I believe that there's a privacy footnote on the plans to address the privacy concerns at that time, and those privacy concerns were never fulfilled at that time, and it creates a very unique privacy overlooking issue unlike anything I've seen before. So I guess the rationale behind the overheight wall addresses 2 key issues. So one is the western neighbours have 2 very large air conditioners that the top of them are over fence height and they align with the, the window sills. And the second more concerning issue is the overlooking that is received. It's clearly shown on the floor plans if you've seen them. There's cones of vision from 3 upper story windows and a balcony, 2 bedrooms, 1 living space, and of course the balcony. So those cone of visions come, deep into the property at 82. So, so I guess the rationale behind, is that 3 minutes? It's quick. So very quickly, the rationale behind the proposed wall is a masonry wall up to the height of the sill, the top of the air conditioners, and a 1200 louvered privacy screen. That screen would allow light and ventilation into the western property.
Thank you. And it's Carl Huston, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. All right. I think there was one other person who wanted to speak now. Yep. Come on up.
Thank you very much for that. My name's Anthony Peterino. Parents live at 88 Watkins Street. Yeah, I don't know what this Trump style wall's about, but yeah, 4.5 metres is definitely going to encroach on our well-being. We've been at the property for 38 years, so all the neighbours are quite nice. Never had a drama before, so just going into the plan proposal, it will heavily encroach on our existing property and cause us to lose many aspects of our quiet environment. The proposal wall and screen are not in keeping with the area and will block sunlight, airflow to our property and further hinder our ability to enjoy the property as we have done for so many years. Yeah, like I said, 4.5 metres, we've got no problem with. Sorry, come up.
Okay. Since this neighbour here, we have had 4 different owners. Only this person that is objecting has put this objection. So prior of building my house, I wasn't the owner of the house next door. We got approval by her. So what that gentleman just said a moment ago is incorrect. No. Okay. So this lady wishes to live in a prison. Well, I think she ought to move her residence.
Right, thank you. So Anthony Pittarino and
Phil Pittarino.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Just if the plans do come back, we just can't read. They just don't seem 100% correct when we're trying to read them. So if the Trump-style planner wants to send them out again,
it'd be good if you could be polite.
Yeah,
if you've got any problems, I'm sure the planners would like to help you read the plans. Thank you. All right. Any other people, or should we get back to the agenda? Okay, great. All right. So as I said, I will call people to speak on each item as we get to those items. Councillors, do we have any petitions tonight? Nope. All right. Deputations, special deputations, or presentations? Nope. I'll ask for someone to move that we confirm the minutes of our last meeting, 28th of February. Councillor Moughlin, seconded by Councillor Williamson Wong. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Is there any elected member communication? Councillors? Well, I had one, which was that I wanted to acknowledge something that happened last week, which is that one of our councillors was awarded the Women in Planning Achiever Awards, which was Councillor Ingrid Van Dawson, who now refuses to make eye contact with me, which recognised the contribution by a female professional across the planning sector in Western Australia, and that's particularly for her work with Uniting WA. But of course, we are incredibly fortunate to have such a person as Ingrid as one of our elected members. So congratulations, Ingrid, on that achievement. Okay, that's going to bring us to the agenda. So I will work through the agenda. The first sort of 9 or so items, we do have people here to speak on them, so I'll stick with the order as it is per the agenda, but we will try and move as expeditiously as we can. So the first item and the second item, in fact, relate to Amherst Street and Stack Street, the subdivision and the development application. I believe I have one speaker at least on this item who wished to speak on this item, and I think that was Stuart Sinclair.
I'm a development director at Locust Property, and we are the owner and developer of the site on the corner of Amherst and Stack Street. To start with, I just wanted to say how pleased we are to hear that the application in totality is recommended for approval tonight. We've spent a lot of time engaging with the community and different stakeholders to pull together this proposal, and we're really confident that it meets with their needs and will be a great addition to the city. As you would have seen, though, earlier this week we circulated a memo where we sought to have the councillors consider an alternative position, specifically in relation to the subdivision application and the POS. So we heard clearly from the community during our engagement that they wanted to see open space, canopy cover, greenery throughout this project, and we agree with the community that POSs of this more intimate scale and size is necessary when we are delivering homes in this medium density urban type of environment. We've seen similar sized POSs delivered in other areas of Perth in similar medium density developments. The DAC and the city officers have asked that the open space within the proposal is retained as communal open space with an easement for access by the public, but that it would not contribute to our public open space obligation. We hope that this means that the city officers and the DAC too agree that the open space within the proposal is an important element of the plan. Obviously, we've just disagreed on what it counts towards. But effectively what we're saying is quite simple, and that is that to set aside 10% of the land within our project as open space and incur the costs of landscaping that space, as well as being asked to pay a contribution of 7.5% on top of that is excessive, and we feel an unfair position. So I thank you for your time tonight and for considering the alternative position that we've put forward.
Thank you. I don't have any other speakers listed. Did councillors have any questions for on that item? Yep, Councillor Sullivan.
As you'd be aware, there are two alternative or proposed amendments in the documentation. One of them is to suggest that the POS is seated in the normal way and you don't pay the 7.5%. And the other one is that that it's turned into common property, but you install it and the strata body maintains it. Yes. Is there a preference from the developer's point of view as to which way is the most logical way of dealing with the matter?
To be honest, Councillor Sullivan, we've only recently really considered all of that area being considered as public open space and ceded to the city. That is the typical situation when public open space is developed, and we would be happy with that outcome. But we have, through all of our engagement with the officers, indicated that we'd be happy to have that open space called communal open space, owned by the strata body and maintained by the strata body. It will be their cost and burden into the future, as long as it counts towards the public open space obligation. So we're actually indifferent, but in keeping with what we've committed to in the past, we'd be happy for that latter outcome.
Thank you. Councillors, any further questions? Okay. Well, we'll get into the discussion. So the first one, obviously, that we're going to talk about is the subdivision. So if I could get someone to move that item. Councillor Archibald, and a seconder, Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Archibald, did you want to open for us? Wait. Yep. Speakers on that item then. Councillor Sullivan.
Before I speak, the suggestion is because there are multiple amendments that we consider requesting through the chair the suspension of so much of standing orders to allow the potential to speak more than once, because it's going to be a little bit unclear as to which amendment should be put forward.
I'm comfortable either way. So if you were moving an amendment and you wish to speak as to why you were moving that amendment, I'd be happy to allow that as a moving of the amendment as opposed to a speaking twice.
Well, it's more to the point of whether the elected body wants to sort of debate a little bit about the options before moving to an option.
Yeah, I mean, sure. If you want to move that way, go for it.
Yeah, so I'll move. The wording will be provided by the staff, but essentially the suspension of so much of standing orders for this particular item to allow additional debate to deal with that multiple amendment.
Yep, and
situation.
Seconder. And that's Councillor Archibald, and I don't think we would debate it because it's a procedural motion, so I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? And against? So it's Councillors Thompson and Graham against. I didn't see how Councillor Van Dawson, oh sorry, and Councillor Moffat. Councillor Van Dawson, I didn't see how you voted for. Okay, so that's carried. All right, thanks. So Councillor Sullivan, back to you.
Thank you, councillors, for allowing that. I thought it was important because I'm actually in two minds as to which of the two amendments I would support. So effectively we have an amendment. It's not an officer amendment as such. It was drafted by the officers, but is not necessarily their recommendation in the sense that it flowed from the applicant saying, we think it should be done a certain way, or could be done a certain way. The officers had a look at that, and have essentially tweaked that approach to put forward one that would be an acceptable version of the proponent's version, if you like. Not the recommended of the officers. Obviously, the officers are still recommending what they've got in their report, so I don't want to pretend during debate that anything is different to that. They haven't come along and said, oh, after reconsidering it, we've put forward an alternative version of what we would want to put forward. So the two amendments essentially try to identify that it is reasonable for the developer in this situation to not have to provide all of the open space and also pay the 7.5% levy in cash for open space. And there's a couple of fundamental issues that need to be raised in this one in justification of that. There's certainly a position I agree with, and I think we need to try and find which one of those amendments we should give consideration to. But the reason I support the non-payment of cash in lieu when the developer is providing a large amount of open space, communal space, call it what you will, inside the development, but are also proposing to landscape the massive verges on two streets in this development proposal, that the contribution that they are making to open space is substantial. The second thing I would say, and I don't like to use it in this sort of way, but there is a sort of a negative argument that you need to be aware of in giving this consideration, and that is the process that has occurred previously. As we all know, neither the community, council, or JDAP were happy with the proposal that was put forward, and that's been made very clear, and the developer has done an amazing job at turning that situation around with the community's input and the like. However, there still exists a subdivision plan for the smaller parcel of land, which they could implement tomorrow by submitting numerous individual planning applications for each individual property. So there is hanging, I guess, in reality, it's not their proposal, I'm just letting you know, it is a reality that if they feel at some stage that this issue of the open space is a deal killer for them as a developer, that they could go back to the subdivision approval that they already have and could start implementing that on a block-by-block basis. And all of the things that the community have fought for and the developer has responded well to in producing a much better outcome could potentially be lost over this issue. So I put that there. I haven't heard the developers say that, so it's not coming from them, but it is something that we as decision makers need to at least give some consideration to. The next thing I want to say is, I guess, having a different perspective to the officers, is that I accept that, yes, they are following diligently the Knutsford Street East local structure plan when they say the plan overall says we'd rather have 10% open space provided as cash in lieu. We've already got Boo Park. We'd rather spend the money in Boo Park. But having been someone that was dragged by the community, almost kicking and screaming, to come back in to look at the early stages of that structure planning before I got back on council, so about 2008 or 7 or whatever, basically the community was very keen about getting these east-west linkages to Boo Park. Now, ultimately, there was a more of a pragmatic view, I think, by staff that said, well, we still like the money. Can't we just have the east-west links along Knutsford Street? And to a large degree, I think if you're basically either side of Knutsford Street, that makes a lot of sense. But this site is right down the other end in the ditch at the corner of Amherst and Stapp, sorry. And to get to Boo Park, you're not going to walk up the hill to get to Knutsford Street to walk down to Boo Park. You're going to go up Stack Street because it's right there. Now, Stack Street is a lot more commercial. It's not ever going to be that beautiful parkland opportunity because it already is developed in a way that has a lot of right angle parking coming off the road and the like. There was also a belief that, well, do all of our linkages have to be along roads? And that was where that sort of mid-block alleyway green connector was very strongly favoured in the community. Very hard to achieve. At the stage when the structure plan was being put forward, I think the land holdings were such that we could get in the one land holding from Amherst Street through to the next street because of the way the land holdings were. It's more difficult now because that whole development basically failed and they sold off the blocks in smaller parcels. And so the opportunity was lost, but it was also telling us that development of that area was actually really challenging. You know, a major developer who owned a big chunk of land ended up flogging it and walking away from the opportunity to do a development in that area. My sense is the mid-block connections are still important. There will be in the structure plan for Swanbourne Street going up to the hill a type of mid-block connection. And it'd still be, in my view, the fulfilment of the community's original goal to have a mid-block connection through the Knutsford Street East. And this is the only way we can achieve that. Now, I know everyone will go, well, the topography is very challenging. Well, you know, so is Jacob's Ladder. You know, it's not that as challenging as that. They are going to have to deal with topography at the Eastern Block anyway. You can't just build to the edge of a bank and think that's going to work. So if you don't commit to doing the first bit, you'll never get the second bit. And if, you know, we know that the third bit is achievable because it's council land. So if we don't commit a way of getting this potential connectivity through, we'll never get it. So yeah, you can say, well, it's a bit of a risky bet. I reckon it's a bet worth taking, and this is the only way I can see us doing it. In terms of which option, whether it's the one that I put forward, which was my sort of first reaction, or whether it's the one that the staff provided, I'm a little bit ambivalent. There's pros and cons in each of them. If the ownership of the land remains with the strata body, there are things which become, you know, question as to, well, what happens if someone in the strata body suddenly puts a fence up? You know, we have to challenge that as opposed to if it's public open space. How do we deal with dogs? How do we deal with nuisance, those sort of things? We have both of those types of parks in Fremantle already. We already have one like this in North Bank, as far as I'm aware. And we already have ones which we don't own, but the community think are parks, owned by other government agencies. So it is doable. I'm, like I said, ambivalent to which version. If elected members think that it's better to go with the one that the staff have drafted in terms of this is a process that works, then I'm quite happy to move that one first. So that's really why I wanted us to have that conversation first. Thank you.
All right. Councillors. Councillor Archibald.
Thank you. I would like to just add that I think what Councillor Sullivan has said is a pretty good summary of some of the thoughts and discussions that have gone on over the last while. But just at the very beginning of talking about these two proposals, we have these two items. I just want to say that I really take my hat off to the developers because what came in the first round was pretty frightening for some of us, and give them their due, they went away and communicated with the community, got a lot of information. I know quite a number of the architects who live around the area I'm in got involved, and what has come back is a pretty exciting opportunity, I think, for that area if it goes ahead. So I'm very pleased that that's been the outcome of the discussions and that it's happened to date. So on the two alternatives, I would prefer the officers version, which I've already relayed to Councillor Sullivan. I think it deals with the public's open space issue fairly well. The other issue is that the cost of maintaining public open space is considerable, and managing smaller areas can be more problematic. And the fact that some of that public open space would then become part of the strata, and they would be doing the management of it and paying for that, to me makes a lot of sense. But I'm very pleased that the amount of green space that has been incorporated into the plans is there, because I think it will make the amenity of the development much improved. And so just to sort of answer that question, I would ask Councillor Sullivan if he would consider moving the officer's version once he's decided that he's heard enough from around the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps following that train of thought, Councillor Archibald, I wouldn't mind getting a comment from the Manager of Parks around our experience managing smaller parks and parks that are very much contained within subdivisions, and if we have a view or a preference on, whether we'd prefer to manage them ourselves or have them managed by the strata.
Thank you. Through the chair, I suppose this would be a unique one for the city to take on the management of. We don't have any sort of, I suppose, parks of this nature in the city that we currently manage. That are this, I guess, sort of the current proposal is quite intense, I guess. So there are residents quite close by. We do manage parks elsewhere that do have residents sort of right on top of them. So there would be some challenges, I guess, just around managing the use of that space. The level of provision that's within the spaces is something the city would need to consider as well. It is quite a small park, but it would have potentially quite intense use as well. And also, I guess, just the public perception of how accessible that park is to them when it is, I suppose, located quite centrally within a development, something which would need to be worked through the design phase as well.
Thank you. So that probably inclines me towards the same position as Councillor Archibald, which is to lean more towards the recommendation that's been drafted by officers. Councillor Van Dawson.
Thank you, Chair. I first just wanted to thank Stuart for coming this evening, and also thank the developers for their genuine community engagement they undertook with this project. As mentioned previously, the first iteration wasn't well received by council or the community, and we really appreciate the genuine efforts and the outcome of that, which will deliver looks like will be a really good outcome for the site. And I'm hearing a lot of positive feedback from the community, and a request to please keep what's on the plan with what's shown on the plan with respect to the community spaces and what have you. Just on review and discussion, I just wanted to clarify that I would support the officer's recommendation in this instance, the officer's amendment, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I meant amendment as well. Councillors, further comment, or back to Councillor Sullivan to decide what he would like to move as an amendment. Councillor Williamson-Wong.
Can I ask a clarifying question, please?
Sure.
If we vote down the officer's amendment and go back to the officer's recommendation, does that mean that the cost of that public open space will remain with us? It's in all of the open space that's provided on the plans.
Chloe, did you want to respond to that?
Through the chair, the officer's recommendation is for predominantly cash in lieu, with a small section of a common property pocket park, for want of a better term. The other alternative is published and available that council could move, which is pure ceded public open space, which would then be the city's responsibility to maintain because it would be owned by the Crown.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Williamson-Wong.
Sorry. Yeah, I guess this is a very interesting proposal to get to be a part of, and it's true that there's been significant change since this first came to council, which I wasn't involved in, and it is good to see that there has been community feedback taken on board and that there has been a change. But I do think that it's pretty clear that the plans read that the public open space that's proposed is really in internal corridors for that development site. And you also see that in terms of the sites in proposed in the subdivisions are also quite small in terms of the R code requirements. So yes, it's met the minimum requirements for site sizes, and in some I think there's some discretions being sought. And so there will be a need for this public open space for those people in the development, but I do not know whether it should count as genuine public open space or whether, I think I'm more likely to support a cash in lieu payment for this site personally.
Thank you. Councillor Archibald.
Sorry, I just wanted to add, given that we've got suspension of standing orders on procedure, that I do want to thank Councillor Sullivan for the work he invested in this, because the alternate officer's recommendation really did come out of the discussions that he was having with the staff about how we manage that public open space area. And so I'm quite comfortable to support that on the basis that, you know, some is identified as public open space, some stays as strata company open space that they manage. But overall, it gives the development a pretty reasonable amenity. And I used to always be very keen, I still am quite keen, to get cash in lieu. I think Boo Park still needs quite a bit of money to be spent on it. But in this particular instance, I was happy to go with the alternate recommendations and to have the open space that's proposed on the development site.
Thank you. Councillor Sullivan, have you?
Well, I think on what I've heard, if I don't hear anything else, I would propose that we go to the amendment that starts on page 5 of the additional documents, which is the proposed amendment that was put forward by the officers, I guess in response partly to my amendment, but partly to how the developers had proposed it as well. So I'll move that way, as I said, starting on page 5 of the additional documents.
Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Archibald, you're happy to second? Councillor Sullivan, did you wish to speak further on that?
Yeah, like I just want to, it is a really challenging one as to whether we stick hard and fast to the local structure plan on every occasion, and the question of how to fund significant improvements into Boo Park or not. The public open space requirements are typically more designed to provide genuine open space in the area of development. That is the fundamental role of it. We, in this situation, said as a council, well, we've got this great park, it's almost a regional park, and there's a lot of money to go into developing it. We have already been lucky enough to get grant funding for some aspects of that over the years, and the mountain bike trail is an example of that, significant improvements. There's more to be done, as Councillor Archibald will no doubt speak to at any stage. The opportunity in that sense, and we're of course also getting a massive improvement potentially to the golfing facilities and the built facilities in those areas, but they're not local. Like, there are things you can do in Boo Park which everybody in Fremantle can come and do, but it's still, if you just want to take your baby for a bit of fresh air, or your small dog for a quick exercise, and you're living at one extreme of Knutsford Street, it's still, it's still a couple hundred metres, 300 metres, that sort of thing. So local parks are important, and they are important to be quite close to where people are living, and particularly in high density. So just because the policy says, well, we want all the cash, and we don't want any open space, is not necessarily the right outcome. It was also done at a time before the Swanbourne Street structure plan came along. That was a subsequent thing. So suddenly the size of development in that area became twofold. And all of their POS contribution is essentially going to the top of the hill to set aside Swanbourne Hill as a public open space. So you've got between these two big redevelopment areas, two massive bookended public open spaces, and the way we're heading won't have any open space in between, or very little open space. We'll have roads that connect to those very large open spaces, but we won't have any little ones. And so I certainly favour getting a few little ones. I want to also speak to quickly the flip side of that is, well, will the rest of the subdivision generate enough cash in lieu to do the sorts of things we want to do in Boo Park? Where's that going to come from? Well, my view is the developments along Knutsford Street, which are partly government owned, we've already seen the fulfilment of those. We've got our own one to do. They're the ones that probably can get away with putting cash in lieu largely into the mix. The smaller lots, and we know there are lots of them, which might only have 3 or 5 or 10 strata units potentially built on them. All of those, even under the West Australian Planning Commission rules, essentially say when your block gets that small, there is no point trying to create, a 50 square metre open space. That's where the cash in lieu is an automatic sort of requirement in a sense. So probably around about 30 or 40% of the total land area in this area is those small lots. And when they get developed and subdivided, there will be a steady flow of cash in lieu. So I don't think we're going to be seeing a scenario where we approve this and then all of a sudden we never get any cash in lieu again, because I just don't think that's the reality. It wasn't the reality with the developments that have already happened. So my understanding is we've got cash in lieu from the bigger developments that have already happened. And I'll see that's a question when I'm finished. And so there is still, as I said, an opportunity to continue to get that as well. I just think in this situation where the developer has come so far, the community are actually saying, this is a much better outcome. We want to see this, where they have sacrificed a lot of the normal way they do development and really come to the fulfillment of a whole bunch of other things in this local structure plan. Keeping industrial buildings, putting in multiple use rather than all single residential, really mixing it up, trying to deal with the car-dominated streets that they had before. Now, you could say, well, they should have done that in the first place, but I think they have come a huge way, and I think we have to have a little bit of a balancing approach in allowing them to do their development this way with the open space they've included. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll just put that question to the planning staff around cash in lieu from the other developments covered by the Knutsford East Structure Plan.
In a very short answer, yes, there has been cash in lieu provided and also imposed on other subdivisions in the area.
Thank you. Councillor Van Dawson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to quickly say on this, the cash in lieu contribution. I mean, what we have here is a proposal where it's on the design, there's communal open space that will function as public open space and connects to it. And so in all, that is how it will function. So I don't think it's fair and reasonable to be charging them a contribution when the design does show and will be subject to a whole lot of other requirements. So we're sure it will stay that way. It will function as public open space. So I don't, think it's fair to be charging cash in lieu, but that's all.
Thank you. Councillors, on the amendment? So I'm going to support the amendment. I don't like giving up cash in lieu for public open space at all. But I think in this instance, because of the amount of work that's been done, because it's adhering to our structure plan that had a lot of work that went into it, and it may not be complete, and these may read as dead ends right now, but as Councillor Sullivan says, we can't hope to achieve the structure plan if we don't allow the elements of that to be considered as public good, if you like, at this point in time. So don't like giving up cash. But I also acknowledge that it is a really hard time to do developments, and everyone will tell you that. And that the pressure on us as a community to find places for people to live and diverse places and affordable places is really high right now. So if this is kind of what it takes to get this moving, aligned with what the community wants and aligned with what our structure plan says it should be, I'm happy to support moving in this direction. Nothing further? Councillor Sullivan, did you wish to close, or shall we go to a vote? All right, so we're going to a vote on the amendment as printed on page 5 and 6 in the additional documents. All those in favour? And against? Councillor Williamson-Wong against, that's carried. So back to the item now as amended. Any further speakers on the item as amended? Right. I'll just add my voice to the chorus of people saying thank you for consulting with the community. It's usually, something that I guess we would recommend to people that they do from the front up. It's even harder when you have to go back and do it, at the second go. And I think you did it with integrity, and I think the community are now really on board with this. And we hope it provides places for people to live in the not too distant future who want to stay in Fremantle or come to Fremantle, of which there are a lot, provided you get your planning approval after this discussion that we're going to have next. All right, so we're going to put this one to the vote. All those in favour? And that looks unanimous, so that is carried. So this is going to bring us now to the second item on the same location, which is the development application. So do I have a mover for the officer's recommendation for this one? I don't believe we have any further speakers. I think we've covered it. Councillor Archibald to move, Councillor Sullivan to second. There's also an amendment for this one, I believe, from Councillor Sullivan. So I don't know if we want to speak before we go into the amendment. We haven't actually resumed standing orders. I didn't know whether we, for that item, so it is back to, great. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I do have an amendment on page 7, which is sort of a hand in glove to the open space, and a bit of give and a bit of take, in the sense that the proposal from the applicant is obviously a very extensive landscaping of the verge, and they've said that from day one. It was an integral part of their proposal from day one before they put in the communal open space and the like. So I very much welcome that. We have a number of developments in the area where very extensive landscapes have been done by the developers, but they also come at a bit of a cost in terms of ongoing maintenance and expectation. As soon as you put them in, there is an expectation from the residents when they move in that they will be kept to that very high standard. So it's not unusual for us to put in place a proposal that requires the strata body to maintain the verges. So before I move my amendment, can I simply ask a question of the officers as to which of the other developments in the area are done that way? So just to get an understanding of the precedent.
Sure. Is that something you're able to answer?
I may see if the manager of parks can answer that one. There are, I believe, the Montreal Commons is one that has been done that way, and potentially even Development WA's verges, but I'm not sure if it's extended that far. But Montreal Commons is the one I know for sure.
Okay. Thank you, through the chair. The one on the corner of Montreal Street and Knutsford Street, the DevWA site is the same as this arrangement, where through the strata they've built the maintenance requirements for that verge into the strata, so the city doesn't undertake any maintenance there other than the street trees, which retain with the city.
Thank you.
So I'll move my amendment printed on page 7 and second.
Councillor Lang seconding the amendment.
Yep. So just in summary, what developers find struggling is to provide big chunks of payment up front, like a 7.5% open space contribution, because it just comes off the bottom line before they've even started. In these scenarios, what we're actually looking at doing is saying there's an expectation of a quality environment for the people who are moving in. And you might have heard me say during the week, was it possible to put in, say, for example, a special area levy or rate, which is what we have at Leighton Beach, because of the same scenario where there is a high quality landscape put in and a high expectation that it will be maintained. So ipso facto, those people pay extra to have that higher quality maintenance. This is another way of doing it, essentially saying that the strata body is responsible for it, for the upkeep of that verge. They created it, in effect, in the development phase. They should look after it and not just let it then turn to dust bowl and become our problem when every individual owner says, well, we bought into this, we want it maintained, and we say, well, we can't maintain every verge like that. So this is a way around it. The developer, so this is our recommendation to the JDAP. The JDAP will probably debate it. The WAPC will want to look at direct connection between the verge and the development. I think that already exists because the developers actually proposed to implement a high quality verge. So I think that connection already exists. So I hope that JDAP won't have a problem with it, but the applicant has an opportunity to really argue against that if they feel so willing. So I don't think there's much of a problem with us asking for this.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. On the amendment, I might put the amendment to a vote. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. So back to the item as amended. Any further speakers on the item as amended? Nope. Okay, well, I'll put the item as amended to a vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. So that gets us through our first two items on the agenda. Would like to call out a group of people who are in the public gallery tonight, which are the people who are participating in our Changemakers program here at the City of Fremantle. It's particularly brave that you came to a very planning-heavy agenda meeting for your first outing with Fremantle Council. So thank you for being part of that program, and thank you for coming along tonight. All right, let's go to Herbert Street in North Fremantle, and I've got a number of speakers on this one. And the first speaker I have is Philip Griffiths.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. I'm here to speak on behalf of the applicant. My name's Phil Griffiths. I'm a heritage consultant. I think I know most of you by now. I received a referral on this to have a look at it last year and decided not to. I received a second request and thought I would and go to it with an open mind. And really, this application turns on the question of the heritage value of the existing house. So I think the officer's assessment of the place contains information that I don't contest, but I would dispute that the place has contributing significance. And I suggest that a dispassionate group of people standing in front of it might come to the same conclusion. It's hard to see how it might. So I'm grateful to the staff's efforts, but I'm going to disagree for a time. I agree that the authenticity has been depleted by a lot of the replacement work that was done by the owner in the 1970s. A bit sad, really. When I got the reports, I received the structural engineer's report and then consequently went to site and thought there was a bit of a hole in that because they hadn't looked at the roof structure. What I saw was a amount of deflection in ceilings and deflection in the roof structure, which was contributing to the ingress of water. And eventually the engineer went back.
Bill, I'll just get you closer to the microphone because
Okay.
we're struggling to hear in the gallery. Thank you.
The engineer went back and revised their view. They now recognise the amount of deflection and work that would need to be done Effectively, you'd have to re-roof both the fabric and the structure to modern codes. It was suggested, of course, that as a contributory place, the house should be conserved. By the time we've finished with that, if that was to be the case, there would be about a 50% authentic and a 50% replacement fabric. In effect, we'd be conserving the framing of the walls, 2 sections of weatherboard and 2 windows and the floors. So the balance would be, because we'd have to insulate the place too to reach current standards, it would be essentially taken apart so there was just a frame standing. I don't believe this is a good heritage outcome for this place. Number 19 is the last of the recognised heritage places in the street, and it's a very fine little stone and brick cottage. Number 23 was a very modest house built in about 1947, but by 2000 we got this rather large house. So that 21 looks like a bit of a sandwich. I think it would be kinder to the precinct to have a transition house of 2 floors to transition between 3 and 1. In summary, I do dispute the contributory value of the house. I dispute that its removal would be a loss, and I dispute that demolition would adversely impact on the North Fremantle heritage area. The house is now uninhabitable and needs, I know it's not a determinant of heritage value, but it needs so much doing that we get a lower intensity outcome. Isn't a transition better? I would suggest there's a way forward that council reconsider the heritage value of the place and make it into a place of little significance to allow a development that is eminently supportable to take its place. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker we have on this item is Charles Nicholson. Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you all hear me up the back? Good. I was born in North Fremantle. I've only lived in Herbert Street for 40 years, and I'm not going away yet. Herbert Street welcomes new residents, especially families, and we're sorry that this proposal for demolition of an existing house and construction of a new house has become a tangled mess for them and for us residents and for council to sort out. Residents were not informed of the revised house plans. Sounds jumping up and down. What's the... We're not informed of the revised house plans in the current development application and have been unable to comment until this meeting. The purchasers of 21 Herbert Street appear to have been ill-informed or misled about planning constraints in North Fremantle, for example, the heritage policy, and our street's hard-won local planning policy that was DGN 13 to protect our streetscape after the construction of the monster house on the corner appears to have disappeared. So we haven't had an explanation of where that's gone. The auctioneer on the day continued to claim that it's not heritage listed, you can knock it down and build what you want, despite my intervention to point out the existence of policies that might constrain that. The architect appears to have initially not fully understood these constraints either. I appreciate council staff's endorsement of the heritage and streetscape values of the house if restored. The neighbourhood has seen a complete adoption of the values of old houses, whether heritage listed or not, and have retained and restored the street frontages and built their extensions up or at the back. The front part of this cottage could be restored likewise. Unfortunately, it has been damaged internally since the new owners took possession.
Herbert Street are not averse to new architecture if done creatively and well, and reflects our street-friendly approach to life in this little community. We have a Clopper House, a De Villiers Greek Igloo, a McCann Wesley House, and extensions done by London and by Jones. Blank double garage doors and driveways do not reflect this streetscape, no matter how far set back. This is a street-friendly social footpath. This is a street of friendly social footpath interactions. The plans give no sense of the footpath view. How will a tacked-on stone veneer fit our streetscape? Is Councillor Archibald's recommendation aimed at getting this planning mess done with by simply waving the approval wand to save council the effort with dealing with SAT? This is the State Administrative Tribunal. Regardless of the outcome tonight, council must ensure that real estate agents and architects are properly informed of their responsibilities before ignorantly or deliberately attempting to push the boundaries of policies and codes that aim to maintain our much valued residential environment. So I hope whatever happens tonight, we get a good result out of the end of it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think a few of the things you've raised may come up in the discussion and we can elaborate on them then. I'll go through all the speakers on this item and then I'll ask elected members if they did want to follow up with any of the speakers. So Sarah Cooper, I think, is the next speaker on the item.
Good evening. North Fremantle Council is rightly proud of its heritage credentials, is currently promoting the North Fremantle Heritage Trail. North Fremantle is enclosed in the North Fremantle Precinct Heritage Area. Herbert Street is also justly proud of its friendly and mainly intact streetscape, with some attractive and sympathetic later houses. And after the unfortunate example of Mr. Franklin's number 23, Herbert Street residents got together to form the Herbert Street Heritage Policy in an effort to prevent a repeat. This policy appears to have been incorporated into the NFPHA. That's incorporated, not defunct. Number 23 was never to be used in any way or form as a precedent for any other Herbert Street build. Over the last few years, many small cottages have been beautifully restored and considerably extended behind the original structures to a great aesthetic and practical degree, while still retaining a pleasing original streetscape. The demolition of 21 Herbert Street is not supported by the Council's Planning Department, and I would like to remind you of your Planning Department statement. The demolition is not supported, as the house contributes to the heritage character of Herbert Street in the NFPHA. The demolition of this house will result in the loss of significant heritage fabric and will adversely affect the heritage value of the heritage area. While the dilapidation of 21 since its purchase in November 22 is sadly due not only to being empty for several months, with windows intermittently left open, and through what I presume is removal of walls, etc., to facilitate inspections, of which there have been many, this does not give a reason to demolish, and nor does the cost of restoration. The new build proposed is disingenuous. It is presented as nicely in line with its neighbours, when a cursory glance down the street will show all manner of different setbacks, which is partially what gives the street its character. With regards to the motion presented very late yesterday for viewing, on February the 14th, we wrote to inquire what was happening with SAT and the planning application. Chloe Johnson very kindly responded. We were concerned that putting together of the two applications, the house and the demolition, could result in, and I quote, "Does this indicate that council is considering negotiating with the owners and may present a fait accompli to the residents at a later date?" This motion appears to be exactly that. This is the motion, I gather, that Councillor Archibald is going to put forward. by overruling the consistent recommendations of the Planning Department and approving a new build that does not sit well in the streetscape. When we moved to Herbert Street in 1999 and inquired about general planning policies, we were told in no uncertain terms that we were not to try and shoehorn a Tuscany in there. And it was very clear. It appears now, though, that you can possibly shoehorn a Swiss-style chalet house with Minim Cove limestone cladding into a heritage area and streetscape. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. And our final speaker on this item is Benara Melania.
Thank you to the Mayor and the councillors here today to allow me to speak. I'm a little bit nervous, but I'll do my best. I'm the owner of 21 Herbert Street. I lived in Sydney for 55 years and decided to move to Perth after my daughter 2 years ago had a stroke. And for 3.5 years, I've been paying her rent. She's gone for a horrible divorce and is still going through the horrible divorce. And when I bought this house, I bought it online at the auctioneer. I was not present. It was 3 days before the auction. Yes, the real estate, Mint Real Estate has said this house is the first house in 25 years that is not heritage and that is, you can build your dream home, you can extend, you can do whatever you want with it. I trusted that what the real estate meant, knowing that he sells all the houses in North Fremantle, would know the correct things to advertise in his paper, because this is very important when people buy in something. That wasn't the case. Last time the council meeting in August, I had a lot of, there was a few councillors that were saying that they should have, sorry, this is echoing and it's making me, that they should have had submitted the plan with the demolition. And their concern was, if they allowed this demolition to go through today and vote for it, that they will not be, they cannot trust me that I do not build, as one of the neighbours said, a monster house. But that monster house is affected everybody in the street, and I totally agree with it. But the one that most has been affected is actually 21 Herbert Street, because that's the house that was neglected by the council by approving that. The rest of them can still go to sleep and not look at it every single day. 21 Herbert does. I was told by the experts that I cannot submit this plan, the demolition only, not the plan, the DA. I was given this by the professionals and I said, okay. So that's why the first time I did not submit that. I went and spoke to a special counsellor lawyer, and he has said to me that I have a right, as long as if you pay for the DA, you have to, in section 75, they have a right to look at it as another plan. And I did it so that people can see my plans are not to build a 3-story concrete house and not a brick veneer or stone brick. I'm happy to compromise with the neighbours. It can be a timber cladding, whatever it is. But I'm here for my family of 3 generations that I'm planning to have a home for, so that they're not left on the street. And I cannot continue paying rent. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, did anyone have questions for any of the people who have spoken to us on this item? No? Okay, so we have a officer's recommendation and we have an alternative recommendation. Do I have someone who would wish to move one or the other? Yep, so Councillor Thompson's moved the officer's recommendation, seconded by Councillor Moughlin. Speakers on the officer's recommendation? Yep. Thanks, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have some sympathy for the applicants, and I think Charlie gave a good account of probably what happened through this auction process. However, one of the things that worries me about this is that part of the argument, and I've seen it elsewhere, is that this provides a transition from the monster house on the corner, Franklin's house, that was built in, I think, 2007. Just to make it clear, and I think Andrew made that, Councillor Sullivan made that clear last time, that house was not a council decision. That was a decision by the then minister who allowed that house to be built. So council has, over the years, has been consistent in applying a heritage overview to this street, which, as you have heard, culminated in the local government policy to cover it in terms of its heritage value. The issue here is that the street itself is a mixture of buildings, but they all have a coherence to them. So the applicant's heritage architect mentioned that the heritage value of the existing house. The heritage value of the existing house is not great. It is the value that it gives to the streetscape as part of a streetscape. I also hear this argument about the house being structurally unsound and or windows missing and cladding missing and stuff like that. Over the years, I have been to any number of North Fremantle houses that have been of a similar. In fact, I can think of two right opposite the old flour mill that were in a far worse condition. And each time, when a redevelopment application comes up or an application for demolition, the state of the house is given as one of the reasons why it should be supported. In every individual case that I can think of in North Fremantle where this has occurred, council has stuck to its heritage guns. And what we have, and it has been really good redevelopment of existing houses. So I don't wear the argument that it's not able to be effectively restored. I mean, parts of it can be. So I think it's very important that I think council sticks to its heritage guns on this. The officer's report is unequivocal in terms of supporting its recommendation. So I would urge councillors to look seriously at that and support it.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Archibald.
Thank you. Look, I just want to make a few comments because I don't discard the whole issue of heritage at all. I think there have been many houses, quite rightly, as Councillor Thompson has said, that have been in a very poor condition, which have been restored. But they are often houses which have been either on the list as an individually listed house, and their significance has been very clearly demonstrated. They're often much older and that sort of thing. So look, I've got a few comments I want to make just to clarify things. That commonly when we are dealing with demolition in a heritage area, we prefer to have an application. If it's a house that is perhaps not on the list as an individually listed house, which this one is not, then if there is to be any consideration of demolition, it's better to have an application on the table. Am I right? Yes? No? I'm wrong? Could I ask
If
the
you want to
question?
phrase it as a question, then I think
I'll ask the question just so I can get it right or wrong. I mean, if I'm wrong, that's great, and if I'm right, I mean, it's my understanding. Given that we've got down here that we want demolition to be with a development application.
Okay.
There is no requirement through the chair to have a new house design or a new development design when you apply for demolition. Quite often people do lodge an application simply for demolition because it is very costly to prepare plans for a new dwelling. Sometimes people purchase or are looking to purchase and may be tossing up whether they make alterations to the dwelling or demolish and start again. So there is no requirement. The scheme quite a number of years ago, I believe, did used to have a requirement in there, but that's long gone.
Then I'm thinking of the wrong requirements, but I'll carry on. So just to have a look at this particular house, it is defined as having some heritage significance, and I guess the issue then is just how much significance qualifies it for being retained. So the list currently, our heritage list currently has 4 levels, 1, 2, 3, and then which can be listed on. 4 is not where you listed; it's just a historic record only. That's often the case when buildings are demolished or just completely unretrievable. So within areas where we have contributory places assessed at the time of application, if it isn't listed, that's when they do a review of the significance of the house. And the statement of significance for the North Fremantle area has various aspects to it, but the part that relates to this particular house is its concentration of mainly modest workers' accommodation dating from the interwar periods. So that's the bit that would relate to this house. Commonly, those sorts of modest workers' accommodation are more significant when there's a cluster of them, and that's also mentioned in the documentation. For a demolition, it states the council must be satisfied that the building has limited or no cultural heritage, and in this case we're talking about limited. It does not make, and whether it makes or does not make a significant contribution to the broader cultural heritage significance. So the word in there is significant contribution to the broader cultural heritage significance. So I guess overall, my feeling about that particular house, and I did email all of my colleagues with some of the reasons, that it is on its own. One way that could be important, one way it's not, but it is in a condition which would require an enormous amount of work. Yes, it can be done, but is it significant enough for us to demand of the owner that the building is completely restored? So there isn't a great deal of original fabric that can be retained. There are various aspects that could, but there is quite a lot that would need to be replaced to make the building safe. So, as planners would say, on balance, I kind of got to the point where I felt that the replacement, which would be able to be a contribution to the streetscape, regardless of what we think of the building at number 23, but it would provide a bit of a balance between 23 and 20 and 19. That on balance, I felt that that if the house was to be completely photographed, as is in the recommendation, and be documented as a historic record, which would mean it would fit into that part 4, then it could allow for the residents, the new owner, to build a building on that site. I certainly did not pick up on the approval of this simply as a way of trying to facilitate its demolition. The building proposal had been lodged with the council and it came through in the agenda at the same time. So I think that's probably all I really wish to say, that I think it is a very difficult situation. But I kind of feel like we have many reasons for keeping many of those very early cottages, and I just don't feel this one in that particular streetscape warrants the considerable work that would be required to bring that building back to a livable standard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Archibald. Councillors, on the officer's recommendation, Councillor Van Dawson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to, first of all, thank the officers for their reporting and also everyone that's come tonight to speak on this item. I understand that there is a bit of concern in the community about it, and thank you to the owner and Philip as well for providing that additional information that will assist in our decision. This one's a really tough one for me. I actually grew up in North Fremantle and lived up the road for many, many years. But I actually do, after much consideration, do share Councillor Archibald's views. So thank you for that. And I have, in my view, I don't feel that the house itself does have significant heritage values or is worthy of retention, given the costs associated, the current condition and costs associated with bringing it back. That's all I'll say. I do agree with everything Councillor Archibald said, so I'll try and keep it short. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lang.
I wasn't going to say anything on this item, but Councillor Archibald actually inspired me a little bit. Some of the points you mentioned about the house being different to its neighbours and being run down, and it reminded me about my house, which is a heritage home, which is different to the houses around it, and it was extremely run down. The aluminium windows and original veranda was gone. It was steel, lino floors. An architect friend of mine came through and said to me, "Can you get out of this deal?" That's what his recommendation to me was. It was that bad. But I've lovingly restored it, and I've enjoyed the process, and now I really love living in a heritage home. So the idea that it's different to the other houses, that's fine. It contributes to the streetscape of Fremantle, which is the town that we all love. And the other point I wanted to make was the dovetailing of demolition application with the new DA. I've not seen that on planning in 6 years in council. I think it sets a dangerous precedent, because we know that while we may approve the house on the drawings, there's no guarantee that they're going to build that one. So I just think that I've never seen it in 6 years, and it's I think it really sets a dangerous precedent.
Thank you. Can I just frame that as a question to planning? Is this the first time that we've seen a demolition application lodged with DA plans?
Through the chair, no, it's not. It's actually quite common for people to do it that way. A lot of the time, if it is in contention about the heritage significance, people do separate it out for the reasons I mentioned earlier about the cost of preparing new plans. But it is quite common for people to lodge an application for demolition and new dwelling or new development.
Thank you. All right, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. And just to clarify that, it was actually in the 90s a very normal process to require applications alongside a demolition application, and it worked quite well. And planning changes, and it changed sometime after Councillor Archibald, or the time Mayor Archibald and myself left, and when we came back, the whole system was different. So that explains some of the sort of, in a sense, confusion. The litmus test for me in these matters is not just about the semantics of, does it have a significance or not. It's very clear in our town planning scheme as to what constitutes heritage, where it's significant enough to warrant retention, and what constitutes the opportunity for council to legally approve demolition. And that line in the sand is the difference between the word little and some. And in many cases, we have a scenario where someone says, and they can be a professional or they can be a layperson, says, I don't think it has much significance, and then they try and define that as either little or some to try and suit the scheme. So our job in this chamber is to make that decision. Now, we have had a number of experts, some of them heritage experts, both internal and external, and of course we've also had a lot of reports about the building condition. For me, I have seen a lot of dwellings, as Councillor Thompson mentioned, which would, in terms of their condition, particularly their structural condition, and particularly when we're talking about timber cottages, where their condition has been significantly more deteriorated than this building. Now, I accept that the owners might argue, but how could they be worse than this building? Well, the reality is they can be a lot worse, a lot worse than this building, and still have sufficient, some or more significance to warrant us to consider demolition extremely seriously and typically not approve it in a holistic way. We might approve a lot of demolition, parts of the building, but not necessarily the whole building, the bit, particularly the contributing bit, which is the streetscape bit. I also wanted to just touch on the issue of timber houses particularly, because everything needs replacing sooner or later. Materiality of a building individually is not what defines its cultural significance. It plays a part. And it doesn't matter whether it's a stone building or a timber building. I've worked on stone buildings where we've had to replace 30% of the limestone because of salt affected. It doesn't diminish the quality of the cultural significance, provided it is done in a way that actually acknowledges that time requires those sort of changes. When it comes to timber buildings, materiality of them is logically not as long living as more robust constructions of brickwork and concrete. Not always. Some timber buildings last for a much longer time. But in the sorts of buildings that we're talking about, workers' cottages that were using inexpensive materials to build houses quickly, it doesn't diminish the fact that they have cultural significance. So the fact that the weatherboards have already been either replaced in part or covered over in part, which is more the case in this building, is not necessarily an argument to say, oh, well, it's lived its life. It no longer has any cultural significance. It no longer has any contribution. So that's what we do with something that's got a little bit old. We just get rid of it. That's not how we deal with heritage. So the fact that roof tiles, if they last 70 years or 80 years and you're not already having to replace them, well, bloody good luck to you, because they do need replacing. If timber cladding, even with the best maintenance, still needs replacing at some stage, right? So we hear these arguments time and time again that it's not in great condition and therefore it has significantly diminished cultural significance. And I would say to you, if we ran that test around so many of the workers' cottages of Fremantle, which large proportion of the timber, if we run that test across those, we just kiss goodbye to a huge amount of heritage stock in Fremantle. Now, in other areas, that might be acceptable, but the cultural significance of a place is in part given to that place by the community. It's a value. And if our community values heritage places, then it will logically include these sort of places as having some significance rather than little. Now, you might go to the next suburb where they have a completely different view. But as I said, heritage, cultural significance is part of our community. It's part of our culture. And it's important that our community sets the standards, which they have. And traditionally, buildings like this have been set at a standard that says retention is the way to go. Doesn't mean you can't modify it significantly. There's plenty of development opportunity at this site, in and around this, and there are lots of options in terms of dealing with it. I get all the emotional angst that comes with it, but that's not my job. My job is simply to decide whether it has little or some. And clearly, particularly after a site inspection, it absolutely has some or more in my perspective. So I cannot, in good faith, support demolition.
Thank you. Councillor Williamson-Wong.
Thank you. I do really appreciate the work that's gone into bringing us a development application and the demolition proposal at the same time, because I think it really means that we get to consider what might go there and not just an empty lot or the loss of a heritage asset, and also have sympathy for the fact that you're in this situation and that there was misunderstandings with the real estate agent. It does not sound fun. But I do agree that the current proposal doesn't necessarily contribute to that broader heritage significance of Herbert Street. And given that the tension really is how much the house contributes to the heritage value of Herbert Street, as we've heard, then in my eyes, if we have the opportunity to see a development application at the same time, that development application needs to appropriately respond to that. And at the moment, I kind of on a pub test wouldn't say that it does in terms of the other streets on the house. And so I think I'm not happy to support the demolition right now, but I would potentially reconsider if there was a new development application that appropriately responded to the rest of the street in a more sympathetic manner.
Thank you. Councillor Graham.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Yes, I spoke strongly in favour of demolition on this one back in July or August, whenever it was. The then Chair of Planning, Councillor Jones, and I actually visited the site on a miserable winter's day and extensively had a look around this house and considered all the things that were identified as perhaps being heritage value. And the two of us couldn't find one thing, to be honest. And I said at the time then, I said, if you actually haven't visited the house and been through it and around the block, you shouldn't be voting on this item back then, and the same should be applying tonight as well. There's a photo on page 111 of the attachments of the existing house, which must have been taken quite a number of years ago, I would say. And you look at that, and disregarding what street it's in, it's just a house. It is nothing more than just a house. It doesn't offer any significance to anything, anywhere, and most probably any time. And you look at the council's Council A recommendation, 1B, makes a significant contribution to the streetscape of the North Fremantle Precinct and Herbert Street. I mean, come on. This certainly does not make a significant contribution to that streetscape, in my opinion. And I've heard everyone else talk tonight, and I just cannot see where you get this. Now, Councillor Lang goes on about there's no guarantee they're going to build what they've planned. Well, that could be said for any approval we put in. They get 2 years or 4 years to build a house, and about 70% are never built anyway. So it's the same thing. You could say it about any Cadge Street that's coming up. May never get built. Also, I think SAT gave in their direction hedging their bets. I think they really most probably wanted to support the demolition, but thought, well, we'll give council one more go at trying to get a smooth sailing perhaps on this one. And that doesn't appear to have happened. That's only my opinion, so it's not based on any science there. But as I say, I cannot see any significance to this streetscape for this house. And having been through it, and okay, we talk about, oh, it can be this and it can be that. But I don't think there'd be one builder in Fremantle, if WA, that would look at that and take this project on, unless they could get a flat surface. And you've got to remind yourself of the topography of the land. I mean, it's a shocking sight, absolutely shocking sight. And it's just impossible for a modern day house to be renovated on this so-called significant contribution to make a livable and habitable house for a family. So please don't support the officer's recommendation and consider supporting Councillor Archibald's alternative. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. I'll remind the gallery to be respectful while people are speaking. Okay, are there any further speakers? Yep. Councillor Mofflin, thank you.
Thank you. I'll be very brief at the end of what is a pretty important discussion, and one obviously that's come back to us to reconsider. And I've reflected on some things that I've learnt over time on council over the last few years and even over the last few weeks. And one thing that is in my mind is that I am not the heritage expert in this regard, but we do employ people who are heritage experts, and they've provided us a report which actually outlines the heritage significance of this property and its contribution to the streetscape. So to borrow from Councillor Thompson's discussion, it is unequivocal as to its contribution, and I'm happy to support the officer's recommendation.
All right. Okay, so I am not going to support the officer's recommendation. I've thought about it long and hard and looked at the site, and I think looked at particularly what has been called out in terms of contributory value on streetscape. And the problem is, next to the monolithic house next to it, its contributory value appears completely diminished. It's kind of in the shadow of what is, something we would never have approved and wish never had been. But its sense of contribution in a heritage sense to me is it's kind of like the tooth that's been knocked out. It's so far back from the street and in the shadow of that huge house that, in fact, the DA or something like it that gives a sense of kind of scale and contribution to me actually feels like a better outcome. It doesn't diminish the rest of the efforts that Herbert Street have made to create a beautiful precinct. I mean, I think it is a really lovely area. It's one that I walked around and up that hill a lot as a kid, and there are some incredible houses. But get on Google Maps. There's also a lot of really huge houses through that area now, and that's something we've all seen happen. It's not necessarily something we've always supported. Sometimes it's happened in spite of us, but that is where it is. I feel like this house that is really, really run down, but also just doesn't really fit to me with the overall streetscape. It sits back in a way that doesn't, it draws the eye almost in and thinks, well, what's that doing there? To me, regardless of the ability to fix that up, whether at the end of it would actually really pay that contributory heritage value to the street, I'm not sure, because I think even its positioning on the block makes that a bit of a furphy. So I won't be supporting the officer's recommendation. Now, from the chairing perspective, thank you, but we won't applaud if that's okay. The chairing perspective, I would just say, obviously, if the officer's recommendation is supported, that is what it is. If it's not, Councillor Archibald has an alternative recommendation. It can be in two parts. So if there were people who were comfortable with the demolition but didn't necessarily want to approve the plans in front of us tonight, I understand it could be moved in those two parts, if that makes sense to people, or not. Now there's conversations going on. I'm just going to get a clarification on that, because I can just see in the decision making it's going to be important for people to understand that. I think it would be useful to people to understand what options were on the table should this should there be another way to go? Councillor, Manager of Planning.
Through the chair, that part B talks to demolition and the house. So the officer's report is quite clear in saying the new house design is supported. It's the demolition that's the issue. So if council were to not support the officer's recommendation, or to support the officer's recommendation, but because they don't support the new house design, they would need to add some reasons to that effect to be very clear that they either support the demolition but just not the new house.
Okay.
You'd need to do some work there.
Yeah, thank you. All right. So if there's no further speakers, I'm going to put the officers. Sorry, Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Right of reply. I'm disappointed with some of the comments that are made by councillors and in relation to this, because to me it's quite. I think, and I thank Councillor Sullivan for his excellent presentation of what our heritage values are. As he said, heritage significance is part of our community, and it's particularly important for this community because they are the ones that actually got council to introduce a heritage policy for their street. And I would also support Councillor Sullivan in what he said. He said, we hear these arguments again and again when it comes to demolition. We hear the arguments about it's just a house, it's really run down, that it wants, needs considerable work, it's unretrievable, there's not a great deal of the original stuff left. I would like $1 for every time Councillor Sullivan and I, in the times we've been on council, have heard those arguments put forward. Yes, indeed, and the issue of where it is, how difficult it is to redevelop on this block with that house. Well, I can point to at least 3 houses further up in Herbert Street that were in far more difficult access positions in terms of its topography and have been very well refurbished. So, and also I want to make it clear that I was one of those that actually went along to the site inspection, and I did speak to the SAT, the SAT representative as well. So I think the issue really comes down to whether or not we. Sorry, one last thing. The officer's report is comprehensive in terms of our reasons for refusing this demolition. And I think that the officer's recommendation is such that the expertise and the application of the policy to it is one that should bear heavily on councillors' minds when they're voting on this item. So I would urge you to support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. All right. So I'm going to put this one to a vote. Councillor Thompson having closed. All those in favour of the officer's recommendation? So it's Councillors Moughlin, Thompson, Sullivan, Williamson, Wong and Lang. And against is Councillor Archibald, Graham, Kamada, Van Dawson and myself. Which is a split vote, which gives me the casting vote. Not a position I find myself in particularly often, but I'm correct there, the Manager of Governance. I am going to I've been consistent on how I voted on this the whole way through, so I'm going to vote against the officer's recommendation. Okay, so now we are going to go to the alternate recommendation. Councillor Archibald, did you want to move that?
Yes, thank you. I'll move the alternate recommendation. Is there a seconder?
Graham?
I won't speak very long on this, but I do want to just clarify that my comments predominantly are about the fact of how we...
I'm just going to ask for a bit of shush in the gallery, if that's all right. Thank you. Councillor Archibald.
My comments are more about how we assess certain buildings in terms of their cultural heritage and significance and I have no doubt whatsoever that that cottage could be restored.
Guys, I'm just sorry, Councillor Archibald. I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to suggest everyone just sits down and we get through the debate. So we're not through the debate yet. We actually need to deal. We have no approved recommendation right now. So if we can just focus on the debate. Thank you. Councillor Archibald, I'll go back to you. Can you move your mic a little bit closer to your mouth too?
Sorry, perhaps I could speak loud and no one could hear anything except me. I just wanted to say that my comment has less to do with whether you can fully restore that cottage or not. It's more about the assessment that you could have, the interpretation you could make on that cottage. That said, I think that's all I need to say. So I will move the alternate recommendation that I've put before you and seek a seconder.
Councillor Graham has seconded that for you. So we can go to discussion on the alternative recommendation. I'd also be interested to know if anyone wants me to move this in part, or if, as the manager outlined before, if there's a desire not to approve the plans as submitted. Thanks, Councillor Sullivan, I think.
Yes, I just wanted to question that in two parts. The first part of the question is we're dealing with a request from SAT for reconsideration. The SAT appeal was over the demolition only, not necessarily relating to new plans or the plans that were submitted. So presumably SAT have requested that we reconsider the decision made about the demolition only, albeit in the context of it would, I think, be helpful to have additional plans. The second thing is there is no question. We really ought to be dealing with the planning application for the new dwelling in exactly the way we would deal with any normal planning application. So the options are approve, refuse, defer, or amend. So I think it needs to be clear, and if we can be clear either through the presiding member or from the staff that those are correct assumptions.
Through the chair, the recommendation is in two parts, so Part A and Part B. Part A deals with the application that's previously been refused by council and SAT is asking you to reconsider. So that deals with the demolition only. Part B deals with a new application, which includes demolition and the new house. So for obvious reasons, you need to demolish the house to build a new one, which is why the officer's recommendation is for refusal. The house design, when you test it against the city's policies, we're satisfied that it meets all those requirements.
Councillors, are we clear on that advice? Because I'm getting some looks that say yes, no. Councillor Archibald?
Could I just ask a question, please? That if this development application did come to the staff with just standalone, given your assessment here, is it a deemed comply application?
Through the chair, it's not deemed to comply, and being in a heritage area, development applications are still required. The house itself, if you exclude the demolition, unlikely, no. I think there were submissions objecting though, so for that reason it probably would have come through, but with a recommendation for approval.
So just to be clear, and I'm referring to page 8 here of the additional documents. Part A relates to the demolition and reconsidering that. And Part B relates to the approval of the house. That's correct. And so if there was a desire from elected members, that could be potentially deferred with some reasons for deferral if the current application wasn't to the liking of the elected members. That's what I... Thank you. Councillor Mofflin?
Sorry, just to clarify, because as I read B, and I might be missing something, so A is about the demolition, B is also about the demolition and build. Yeah.
Unfortunately, under planning legislation, there's nothing preventing someone continuing to lodge an application for the same thing. I guess in proper and orderly planning terms, if there is a house on site, you need to consider that separately. But also, there's also an existing refusal that council can't just backtrack on. So that's why they are combined in two recommendations in the same report. But yes, it's effectively because council have now voted down the demolition. It really comes to the point about the house design. So officers are supportive of the house design. So the recommendation only deals with the demolition being a reason for refusal. So if council were to want to defer the item for changes to the house design, that's probably be my recommendation. I'm not sure adding additional reasons to the refusal that are quite different to officers is probably the way to go tonight.
Clear as mud. Councillor Williamson-Wong, you had a question, then it went away. All right, so I'm going to move it in two parts. Is that, Councillor Sullivan, you're requesting that that's what happens? All right, so I'm going to move Councillor Archibald's alternative recommendation. So part A, all those in favour? And against? And I'll vote for. And that's carried. And part B, and we'd give reasons after, I think, if it were voted down. All those in favour of part B? And against? Sorry, Councillor, sorry. Okay, I'm just going to call part B again. All those in favour of part B? Councillors Van Dawson, Sullivan, myself, Kamada, Moughlin, okay, Graham and Archibald, and against, and part B is carried also. All right, so that concludes that item tonight. So that's Herbert Street done. Gosh. That's going to bring us to Daly Street. I'll give us a minute if people do want to leave the gallery if they were here for Herbert Street. All right, so we've got a few speakers on the Daly Street item. I'll refer to my notes. We have George Haj Gabriel speaking on that item. I think I got that partly right. You can correct me. Thank you, George.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mayor, councillors and city staff. My name's George Gabriel. I'm from Row Group. I represent the proponent of the application, being the owner of the South Fremantle shopping complex, which directly adjoins the site. I wish to speak in support of the officer's recommendation. As you are aware, the site is owned by the city. It's the former landfill site where disturbance of soil is problematic. Intensive use or development of the site is challenging at this time given the cost of remediation. The proposal seeks approval for an interim use being a car park, which will not require extensive remediation or soil disturbance, and which is a use that will not compromise the ability for future redevelopment. Late last year, the city approved key terms and conditions for the lease of a portion of the site to be used as an overflow car park. My client's intent is to ease pressure on parking at the shopping complex during peak periods and to create an area for staff parking, some of whom are currently parking on the other side of Hampton Road. Shoppers during peak periods currently need to drive up and down existing parking aisles waiting for a bay, so this additional parking will reduce those internal traffic movements. Whilst lease terms have been agreed, development approval is required for the proposed car park use. As part of the application, my client submitted an updated site management plan and construction environmental management plan, which were both vetted by the Department of Health and the Department of Water and Environmental Regulation. The agencies advise that there is no objection to the proposed development. The development application was advertised for public comment, and additional information has been provided to the City in response to submissions that were received. My client approached Shawmac traffic engineers in response to concerns raised regarding the notion of increased traffic generation. However, the advice from Shawmac indicated that the proposed development does not warrant the provision of a traffic impact statement or further assessment. It's noted that there is no direct vehicular connection between the proposed car park and surrounding roads, and there is no change proposed to the existing shopping centre. An updated development plan was also prepared and provided to the City to clearly identify the location of existing trees and to identify additional landscaped areas that have been proposed to improve tree retention. Whilst careful consideration has been given to tree retention, it's recognised that the removal of some trees will be required. My client has engaged an arboriculturalist to review this matter. The arboriculturalist concluded that of 27 trees located within the proposed leased area, 17 are able to be retained in the 4 proposed landscaping areas and the 3 metre wide landscaping strip located along the northern lot boundary. The landscaping areas will require removal of soil to a depth of 30 centimetres and replacement with clean soil, as is required also by the Construction Environmental Management Plan. I confirm that my client is supportive of the proposed condition of approval recommended by the City staff, which requires the lodgement of a detailed landscaping plan to the satisfaction of the City. My client is also prepared to commit a contribution of $10,000 to assist with the City's greening strategy and urban forest plan, which we believe will cover the cost of planting approximately 100 trees throughout the City, but I'm not sure on that number. In summary, my client wants a successful centre for ease of use by customers. The proposed car park represents a suitable short-term use of an underutilised area that is a use that requires minimal soil disturbance. It does not prejudice the overall future development of the site, given that no built form is being proposed. Therefore, the City will maintain flexibility to consider future alternate uses of the site when economic conditions are more favourable and when the cost of more intensive remediation can be justified. For these reasons, we respectfully request that Council endorse the Officer's recommendation and approve the development application. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, George. Councillors, did anyone have questions for, Councillor Sullivan?
Thank you. I just have a question relating to the movement of people rather than the movement of vehicles through the combined car parks. Obviously, a lot of the stores that are particularly at that end of the current development are supermarket-like and require shopping trolleys or carrying of large items and the like. Your proposal seems to include a vehicle ramp to the upper new car park, but not much in the way of pedestrianisation to get to it. Is it all staff parking, or is there an expectation that customers are going to go up a 1 in 12 ramp with their trolleys and the like to get to that? How does that work?
Yeah, it is largely staff parking. So a lot of the staff are currently parking on the other side of Hampton Road, but quite a few are actually coming into the main car park, and that's obviously taking up bays that customers would otherwise be using closer to the centre itself. So the intent is that the large existing hard stand area would predominantly be catering for staff parking, but there is also the section of proposed parking that is closer to the centre that may be attractive to shoppers. There are some challenges in terms of levels, and our expectation is that shoppers will obviously prefer the bays that are closer to the shopping centre in the first instance.
Thank you.
Just a follow-up question to that. In terms of shopping centre car park design and the like, I'm just intrigued. Is it normal to have a large area of car park where the only way to get to and from it is in your car? Is there not a requirement in standards to require reasonable level of pedestrianisation from such a big car park to the place that the staff or the shoppers need to go?
Yes, indeed, there is. You'd always want to try to promote that people are parking their cars and getting out and walking to the centre. It is difficult when you're trying to retrofit something, so you have to make compromises, unfortunately.
Okay. Councillors, we do have another speaker on this item, I think, as well, who is Robert Boston. Robert.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. I'm here on behalf of RJ Coleman. We're the adjacent property owner to this proposal and have recently, up until 5 years ago, used this hard stand area for transport uses. I just want to note a couple of things. One, historically, this is one of the most contaminated areas in the state and has been subject to large developers like Australand, now Fraser's Group, walking away from it. And I think if you review the independent review reports by the consultants on this, they still have concerns about disturbing the area that's proposed for this car park. Furthermore, under the land, the land is actually zoned development under the LPS 4, and under the Coburn Coast, it's mixed use with new local access proposed to run through it. And this is the interesting point because I've been here over the years when this particular area has been challenged under planning with Councillor Sullivan, and a proposal that the existing road networks terminate the end of this back block. Previously, there's been discussed on how that would be, and this is where this traffic issue becomes a point. We previously put a proposal together for some 214 units to be built on the adjacent site, and the point that held it up in the end was that your own engineers said that due to the traffic management would not facilitate that onto Hampton Road, Rockman Place, and at the time even indicated the entry points coming out of the South Fremantle Shopping Centre. So I find it interesting that should I put a development proposal again, which we parked after significant some 9 months of discussion with the council, that I would be required to put a traffic assessment impact study in, and at this point we don't have one. And I also find it interesting that if we've got the employees parking across the road at an existing facility for them to park, that this car park area will be used for employees in a separate area, and also increase the interaction with the existing contamination issues. Because some 30 years ago, when we discussed the ability to fill this in and use it for hard stand, which has been compacted for some 100-ton trucks to drive over, so really a lot of the civil works has been done here. The only reasonable use, due to lack of interaction with human beings, was for it to be used for a transport depot, containers, etc. So we have an issue. The other thing I find surprising that having had a 9-month discussion with the council previously on the structure plan for this area and what could be done, that we find, sorry, I lost a point there. That's okay. And then obviously the last point, if the council is minded to support the construction, I find it interesting given there was such a proactive stance for us to get on and redevelop this area in the last 2 engagements in 2012 and 2018 and follow up in 2012, that they would seek to put this facility in front of any redevelopment that would occur. Lastly, we did put a condition in our submission in requesting for the fencing condition. There's currently garrison fencing there that has been taken down by vandals, and our property has been subject to continued vandalism over the last 5 years, of which we've repaired at our cost, and we've asked that the similar garrison fence be put on the boundary and that anti-vandalism locks be included. I note that Rose's response was that it just be a chain mesh fence, and that's not going to work because there's plenty of examples in the local area where these are cut and access goes through. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Were there any questions for the neighbour? Yeah? Nope. All right, so we will go to the item. Do I have a mover for the officer's recommendation? Councillor Graham, seconded by Councillor Moughlin. All right. Do you want to open discussion, Councillor Graham? Nope. Okay.
The applicants accepted the lease arrangement that was decided sometime last year. I can't remember when. and in good faith and is making a contribution to the city. So I think it's a supportable proposal and will benefit not only the staff but the people who want to have a bit of overflow down there. Easter coming up, it won't be built before Easter, but good luck going down there on Thursday before Easter.
Thanks, Councillor Graham. Councillor Lang, you.
I had a question. I couldn't see in the minutes, or sorry, in the agenda, just a clarification on the donation contribution that they're offering to make for compensation for cutting down some of the trees there. Do we need to capture that now in our advice notes, or does that come at a later date?
Through the chair, I can, I guess, begin to answer that and might throw to the acting CEO to follow up. There's nothing in the planning legislation that means we can take a contribution, so it can't be dealt with through the development application, but the acting CEO may be able to provide some options as to how the council may be able to accept the contribution.
Thank you.
Through the chair, further to that comment, so we would, given the kind offer, we would seek to look at that contribution through an alternative arrangement such as a sponsorship agreement or similar outside of this process.
Thank you. Councillors on the item. Councillor Sullivan?
Some questions, and I'm not sure who's going to be able to answer them, perhaps the director. The issue of car park designs is something that is concerning. The existing car park, I think if it was to be rated by residents of Fremantle, they would say it's not the best car park for a shopping centre that they're aware of. But when we come to a new design, I mean, what are the standards that are meant to be met in terms of tree planting, in terms of public access, in terms of getting out of your car and to the shop? I mean, when you go to new shopping centres, they're quite sophisticated in terms of getting you from your car to the shop and back safely. Are there standards that have been applied in this instance?
Might be a bit general. Yep. Thanks, Chloe.
There are very limited planning requirements on these. Really, it refers to Australian standards for car parking design. And my knowledge of them is that they're pretty light on in terms of the expectations for urban design type elements such as tree planting and the like. Given it is a development zone as well, there's very limited things in the way of planning policy that put an onus on the developer to actually improve the scenario. In terms of whether the standards require pedestrian pathways and things, I might throw to the director there, but we did seek advice from our engineering team and they didn't raise any significant issues with the design as it was put to us.
Thank you, through the chair. In terms of the corporate layout and the design, there are design guidelines that the officers and the engineers would work to, and predominantly they'd speak to bay sizes and proportions of accord bays, etc., and suitable pedestrian access. I couldn't speak to what the parameters are around those in terms of this site and specifically how this has been laid out, but there are guidelines.
So is it fair to assume that the officers reviewed them according to those guidelines and they haven't noted any concerns?
The second question for me would be relating to the tree planting and the expectation of what sort of trees will be planted and the extent to which they will be maintained and provide shade. And I guess the point is, are we having an anticipation that we're going to see significantly large trees, not necessarily large from day one, but large over time, that are more than the topiarised olive tree, so that they provide some shade? And also, is there are we clear as to whether in fact trees can be planted in a contaminated site, either from the EPA perspective and or from the capacity for those trees to actually survive a high methane exposure. Having planted most of the trees, or been part of planting most of the trees that are on this site, I know how many didn't survive because of the contamination.
Again, I'm not quite sure who that's for. I do note there is a condition around agreement to a plan, but
through you, Chair, and the manager for parks may be able to expand a little bit on which species of trees may be able to survive. But the advice we did get from officers in the parks team was that, yeah, trees should be planted on site, and they were supportive of the landscaping plan, just ensuring that the right tree pits and things were proposed. Regardless of a planning application, the applicant will need to comply with the Contaminated Sites Act and go through DWER. If DWER does come back and say trees should not be planted on this site, which I think is probably unlikely, then we would factor that into our discussions with them on the finalised landscaping plan.
Thank you. Shall we get to the item? Councillor Kamada?
Yeah, we're speaking on the item, I take it. Okay, yeah, look, I support the officer's recommendation here. I think the applicant's been very cooperative through this process. The 17 trees will be retained. The $10,000 contribution you have to take in good faith, and I think that's goes towards our tree planting programs. They've agreed to the bike track, which is something that council asked to be considered, and they've obviously come through with that one. And the city receives a return for an otherwise useless piece of land, really, at this point in time, that we still have the ability to do something with in future when technology changes. So I'll certainly be supporting the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kamada. Councillors, do we have any further speakers on this item? All right, I'm going to move to a vote. All those in favour? And against? Councillor Sullivan against, so that's carried. Thank you. Okay, we're coming to 18 Watkins Street. We have an officer's recommendation and an alternative recommendation. Do I have a mover for one or the other of those? I hope I do. Would someone like to move a recommendation for this item? Councillor Thompson, moving the officer's recommendation. Councillor Graham to second the officer's recommendation. All right, on the officer's recommendation then, as moved and seconded, do we have any speakers on this item?
Dealing with 18.
18.
Yep. Obviously, I'm suggesting an approval. Sorry, I'm just trying to get to where we are.
That's all right. I'm just going to clarify. We did have one speaker on this item before the debate. I guess if there were any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them now, although I think we probably had the opportunity then as well. I didn't see that there were any other speakers on this item. So, okay. Back to you, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. Good opportunity for me to catch up. The concern, I guess, I had with the refusal, I totally understand where the staff are coming from in terms of not seeking the approval. They're dealing with the policies and the like. For me, the moment I saw the plan that was presented to us and ultimately approved, I looked at it and went, it's nice and it's fine, but boy, that rear setback's a killer. It just felt like it needed more space at the rear. And then I looked at it a bit more and I said, well, why the hell do they put the outdoor living areas on the west side into the facing hot sun? And why didn't they flip it? And, I just had all these concerns. And then I ultimately heard that actually the original design was the mirror image and it was set further forward. And the advice was that it would be more consistent with our streetscape policies if they did it the other way around, and hence that's what we were presented with. So I, as you recall in the meeting last time, actually said I'd love to see them come back with the alternative design, their original proposal, because it offers a quality of living that is so superior to the approval that they currently have. So I wanted to speak to the reasons why I acknowledge the officer's comments, but disagree with them in terms of policy, and that is the streetscape policy in normal situations gets us looking at three houses either side. So the three houses either side in this case are really actually just three houses to the east along Watkins Street, and doesn't really take into the context all of the other inputs in that area. And I remember saying, oh, aren't there a bunch of houses in Edmund Street, which is this is on the corner of, just up the road, that are similarly new development, but are two-storey and have significant reduced setbacks. And of course, they're not just up the road, they are literally over the road. And those houses, if I can go through them, all two-storey, all significantly larger than what is proposed on this site. So the one immediately over the road on the opposite corner, I guess, has a 3.4 metre setback on Watkins Street, a 2.2 metre setback on Edmund Street, and I think the garage is set back 3.7. The next one on is 4.6 metre setback, and the next one on from that is 3.4 metres. Significantly bigger, bulkier buildings in the streetscape with significant reductions in setback. And so in the context of this pretty elegant single-storey building, the setbacks that they're proposing, by comparison, I think are actually quite modest and reasonable. The other thing is, well, okay, if you go back just to the policy, the streetscape in Watkins Street is a really weird one. It starts at the top end of the street, around about 5.5 metres, and because the side boundaries are not at right angles to the street boundary, all the houses subsequently just keep getting further and further and further back until the house right next door to this is actually set back 9.1 metres. Now, you know, what a waste of land when you already have a 12-metre verge to have a 9.1 metre setback, and then to start thinking that we should require the new building to correspond to that when you look at the precinct more generally and the setbacks are quite mixed. So I'm looking more at, I guess, a first-hand approach to assessing this one. And when I look at the overall context, I see a proposal that actually is a really good infill development with reduced setbacks that doesn't have a great impact on the streetscape, and there's a strong commitment to the landscaping and the like. I would just say in terms of the issue of the tree, the Cook Island pine, as opposed to the Norfolks, which are just to the left, none of us ever want to approve a tree being lost. The applicant would like to keep it, as we've heard tonight and as I think has been proposed. And they would like to submit a ways around the crossover, more creative ways to get around it in a sense. And so there is a recommendation in the alternative which basically talks about that the tree must be removed for the crossover. If it gets to that, I would like to move so the alternative recommendation, a minor amendment that actually puts it more in the terms that either you can submit for approval from the staff a crossover that gets around the tree, and the staff will have to look at that from an engineering perspective, or you can submit a proposal that includes the demolition of the tree. The applicant would like to keep the tree. I just want to give them the option to do that. So I would suggest that when we get to the alternative, hopefully, that we can tweak that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Sullivan. So on the officer's recommendation, Councillor Archibald.
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to say I completely agree with Councillor Sullivan's comments that the applicant is quite keen to look at ways to keep the tree, but I would support the alternate recommendation and would suggest that we vote the officer's recommendation down to facilitate the building of what is, quite a modest and very sustainably built home, or to be built home. we did approve a different proposal, which is like the flip of this at a previous council meeting, but this one does improve the amenity of the living spaces to the rear of the house and keeps it away from the prevailing winds a little from the west and gives them a little bit more north light into the courtyard and into the living space at the rear of the dwelling. I'd just also like to add that in terms of the verge, that the applicant is a very good friend of Dave Broon, who is the Valley Verge's kind of master in White Gum Valley, and they also are proposing to completely landscape the verge to go along with the house. So I feel that the applicant is committed to making a really outstanding outcome for the streetscape in that sense. So I would concur with Councillor Sullivan's comments, and I would support his alternate motion and vote this one down.
Councillors, further discussion? I'm in the same position as Councillor Archibald, so I'll wait for Councillor Lang to come back in and then I'll put this to a vote. So we're on the officer's recommendation. All of those in favour of the officer's recommendation? And against? So that's obviously lost. So Councillor Sullivan, you'd like to move an alternative recommendation, seconded by Councillor Archibald, I'm guessing. Yep. So the question is regarding the condition. Yeah, great.
So through the chair, while our engineering team does have some doubts that it can be done in a safe way, it is potentially possible to at least try to keep the tree and work through a possible design for that crossover. So in terms of that additional condition, I've added some additional wording in there on Councillor Sullivan's request to say the street tree shall be protected during the construction of the crossover, or if unsafe to retain, removed to facilitate the crossover. And there is an additional advice note at the very end just to explain the process and that, you know, should an alternate safe design for the crossover that protects the tree be achieved, the preference is to retain the mature tree, but the advice in there about the cost of removing the tree remains in there for the applicant's information.
Thanks.
Mayor, I'd move the alternative rec with that amendment included.
Yep. Happy with that? Yep, absolutely. That's fairly minor. All right. Do we want to speak further on the alternate recommendation? If not, I'll put it to a vote. All those in favour? And that's unanimous and carried, and that's a decision tonight. Thank you. All right. It's past 9 o'clock, so I'll move that the meeting go beyond 3 hours. Seconded by Councillor Archibald. All those in favour? I know that's not what you really think, but that is what it is. We'll carry on to the other end of Watkins Street, so 82 Watkins Street. So I know we've been asked for a deferral on this one. So do I have a mover? Yes, we do. Yeah, I'm just going back to my notes. Moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Sullivan. And did you wish to speak? Councillor Archibald?
Yes, I'll be very brief because the applicant has spoken tonight at the beginning of the meeting. The applicant is very happy to look at alternate ways to achieve what she needs to achieve on the site, and in discussions with the staff, it was felt that it was much more practical to defer it so that it could then be all the different options could be looked at sensibly, and then it can come back at the next appropriate council meeting. So
okay, so you're moving a deferral, Councillor Archibald?
Well, I'm happy to move a deferral.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Sullivan. All those in favour? And that's unanimous, so that'll come back to the next convenient meeting. Okay, so that's going to take us to Cad Street. I believe we have one speaker on Cad Street, being Sean Banner. Maybe we have two. Good, now I know. Sean.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, councillors. Could I please ask you to go to your emails? I sent through a document, a PDF document, with a justification. Again, thanks to the planning department. They've said they're recommending approval, but it just clarifies why, I guess, this approval is.
I will ask you to speak to it if you can, Sean.
Okay, yeah,
Thanks.
I'll speak through it if everyone can open that up. So basically, there's some images of the amended design. One is from the property where it exists, and one is from the neighboring property. Basically, the amendment that was made based on the last planning, the last council meeting, was we lowered the southern height of the wall of the southern boundary. We'd already accommodated the setback, moving that to 1.6 earlier in the, I guess, the process of the design. But yeah, so thankfully the planning officer's recommendation was to approve it. Simply, it is this amended design meets all the deemed to satisfy requirements of the R codes. You can see here the shadow diagram is now under the 25% minimum, maximum, sorry, overshadowing. And you can see in the email logs, Jonathan Dornan, the planning officer we're working with, actually suggested we could go a little higher than what the final submission was. And I replied to him saying, the updated overshadow mapping was generated using the drafting software based on the gradient of the terrain. So I, myself, representing my client, are happy to retain that height as it is, below that deemed to satisfy amount. And the rest is all deemed to satisfy. You can see we were actually going to be pushed to we were ready to submit in the last council. So ideally we would have had this approved a month ago. We were going to be pushed to next month, and I spoke to Jonathan and said, could we come to this meeting? We really want to get this resolved. And you can, yeah, the diagrams are there clearly showing the new roof line is actually on that lowest solar angle. It allows the light to come through and enter the neighboring house's kitchen and living spaces. So there's no actual overshadowing of that anymore. So yeah, it met that condition, under 25% deemed to comply. It accommodated the changes to the neighbors that they had requested to increase that setback to 1.6 minimum, to lower the roof height, so we're not overshadowing beyond the deemed to satisfy amount, and we've added a 1.6 privacy screening on the deck, and we're looking at actually lowering the deck to not add any extra of the screening to the fence line, which the neighbors were looking at. As a result of these changes, it's created economic hardship for my client in having to do some groundworks now that we were trying to avoid. It's putting the trees at risk. We're working with an arborist because we've had to push so close to the trees now, but we're working with the arborist to keep those trees healthy. And it's inconvenienced the builders as we've had to have them delay the actual building process as well. And then you'll finally see the images of these mature, established trees, and the fact that they actually offer a canopy like to that skyline as you enter the gateway through Carrington Street and South Street, that corner. They're quite prominent, and I think for everyone living on Cad Street looking up that hill, it actually creates a canopy to look towards as well. So yeah, that pretty much covers it.
Thank you. Were there any questions from councillors? Oh, okay. Kate Turk, you're the other speaker on this item.
Oh, yeah. And it's in line with the strategic community plan and the green
plan.
Okay,
thank you.
I'd like to thank you firstly for considering the email and the views that we expressed prior to the last council consideration of this meeting. Unfortunately, we think it's a shame that it's come back so early because there hasn't been the consultation with us as adjoining neighbours in presenting the amended plans. As adjoining landowners, we continue to be concerned about the overshadowing and the solar access, and we don't think that the plans provided provide sufficient information for the council to consider these matters adequately. We thank the neighbour and the architect for amending the application, but as I said, it hasn't been done in consultation with us. And although we've been away, so there's been awkward timing, we left the last meeting with a positive feeling that we would have some consultation about that, and that hasn't happened, unfortunately. As it stands, the changes to the roof height do reduce the overshadowing, but we think it continues to be a problem. And we don't think that there's enough information to assess the overshadowing such that the plan is deemed to comply with the R codes. Today, the council has been provided with an overshadowing diagram in figure 3 in the agenda papers and a more detailed one in the attachments. But we can't see from those plans that the overshadowing has been calculated to take into consideration the ground levels of our block, which is in some places 1.5 metres lower than the base of the existing and planned buildings. So without this information, we can't see how the planning officers can calculate that the overshadowing is deemed to comply. We didn't agree with the calculation in the original plan, and we disagree with it now. In our view, the plans are deficient in other ways. The west aspect, which is figure 9 in the agenda papers, isn't correct. The proposed ancillary dwelling is supposed to be 1.8 metres from our boundary, and if you compare that with the 2.3 metres noted on that figure, the dimensions are out. Also, the east aspect, so figure 7, doesn't take into account that our house is 1.5 metres lower than the proposed dwelling. So both figures misrepresent the sight lines. So again, we're not against this development or infill development generally, but we think the council needs to consider appropriate thresholds. Of the 43 metres east-west of our block, apart from a car spot at the start, we're going to be left with 3 metres that aren't overshadowed by buildings for our northern aspect. We believe that there is a way that this design could be made to reduce the overshadowing, and we welcome working with the architect and our neighbour to achieve that, such that the plans could be deemed to comply. But we think on the available information, we don't agree that they are. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, do we have someone to move the officer's recommendation? Councillor Moughlin, seconded by Councillor Archibald. I might just ask the question of the planning staff in terms of the level change between the blocks and the deemed to comply overshadowing, if that's all right.
Through the chair, that is factored into the assessment, so the officers have confirmed and agree with the applicant's assessment that it is deemed to comply, and we have factored in the level differences in that assessment.
Thank you. Councillors, any discussion? Or Councillor Moughlin, thank you.
Yeah, a question again to staff in regards to consultation. So when amended plans come back, such as in this instance, which then officers assess as being deemed to comply, is there consultation ordinarily undertaken as part of that process, or if it's essentially meeting the requirements, then it's approved?
Through the chair, we do obviously notify any submitter who has raised concerns or even supported a proposal that it is coming back before a council meeting. The city's policy effectively does say that if something is deemed to comply, or they've amended the plans to tick the box about complying, then it doesn't go back for formal consultation with that 2-week process.
Councillors, any further debate, or we'll go to a vote? All right, I'll put the officer's recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Okay. That's going to take us to the next item we have someone here for, which is the local heritage survey item. And then I'll go back to the items where I don't have anyone in the public gallery. So we have Eli Leith to speak on this one. Thanks, Eli. Thank you for waiting.
No worries, last one. Good evening, councillors. My name is Eli, and I am one of the owners of 7 Douglas Street in Fremantle, which is our family home. The reclassification of 7 Douglas Street from level 3 to historic record on the city's heritage register was put before council on the 6th of December. This change was recommended by the City of Fremantle's heritage officer following a review of the property. The outcome from that council meeting was for our property to be reconsidered at a later date to allow further review of the property's potential contribution to the streetscape. I would like to thank the councillors that voted in support of the recommendation at that meeting. As there were no objections to the fact the property has been heavily modified over the years, I'll only speak to the streetscape in question and the houses adjoining ours at 7 Douglas Street. Number 3 is not heritage listed and was likely built 20 or 30 years ago. Number 5 is an easement and a public park. Number 7 is our home. It is a brick house. It's noted as having major alterations, little evidence of its original form, and the listing is noted with a recommendation for removal in 2007. Number 9 is a timber cottage. It has medium authenticity with some alterations. Across the street at number 6 was a timber cottage, which was demolished in 2020. Number 8, directly across from us, is the only other brick house adjacent to our property. It is also listed as having major alterations, little evidence of its original form, and again, its listing has a recommendation for removal in 2007. And lastly, number 10 was demolished in 2010. In short, our streetscape is not the West End of Fremantle, and the only really similar building is similar due to its high levels of modification over the years. Clearly, a heritage review of this by a city officer occurred in 2007, and the property was assessed as not being of level 3 heritage value. This is supported by a review from the city's current heritage officer following our request for review in November of 2022. The City Officer's recommendation is again put before the Council and again recommends the property for listing as record only. I trust that the Council will support the City's Officer's recommendation in this matter.
Thank you. Did we have any questions for Eli? Oh, thank you. All right, so to the item. Someone to move the item. Councillor Archibald, seconded by Councillor Williamson-Wong. Does anyone wish to speak on this item? Councillor Graham.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. Yeah, look, I'm concerned about 140 Stirling Highway. I spoke strongly about the heritage assessment that was presented to us back in 2019, and I picked it up that it's been to add to the heritage list in this review. But I also note that the applicant either didn't receive notification or received it too late. Strangely enough, so did Blencoe Street, or 8 Swanbourne Street, which I'm sure they're not owned by the same applicant, same person, but it seems odd that they both didn't get their notifications. But I'll be brief on this 141. I mean, look, this is the City of Fremantle's Powerball here, and I said it back in 2019, and I'll say it again. There is virtually, again, no, in my opinion, heritage significance to this daggy old office block that sits on the side. I mean, whether it was still being used as an office block or if it was still derelict like it is now, it's still not worthy of any heritage significance. I mean, no Prime Minister came out of it. No one of significance came out of it. It's got Summer Hayes' name on it that was perhaps the architect, and that's mostly what's giving it its bloody heritage protection. And I remember speaking to Mayor Pettit when this one went through, and I said, well, how come you supported this? And he says, oh, I had a letter that was signed by 14 people. 14 people, goodness gracious me. I mean, if you're going to live in this site, you're going to be thinking you're living in Mozzie Park. You're going to go down to the boat shed or the new Coles in Mozzie Park. You're never going to come to Fremantle. Fremantle's just going to sit back, clean up the rubbish once a week and rake in bucket loads of cash. And that's where our Powerball comes from. And this is going to impede whatever development comes there. I suppose I'm talking to, I'm not going to convert anyone, but I'm venting my spleen on it. And it's just, it's a no-brainer that we've got to knock off some of these buildings. I mean, that guy just made the right point. It's not the West End. I mean, the heritage battles were won when Councillor Archibald was Mayor Archibald and Mayor Catalini and all these people, and we're pulling at strings to think that this has got some heritage value. But anyway, so what I do is I'm not going to support number 2 for those reasons. And then I note number 3, that it won't come back to, it'll just be, if no objection was received, we'll proceed without further reference to council. Now, given that this was a late objection received, how would the officers handle that? I mean, would that come back at some point? I mean, it's going to be out of our hands anyway, because will get demolished, approval. So, I don't know, but I'd like to know that, whether I support item 3. Can someone answer that?
I don't know if we can comment on that question.
And so if they can be moved in parts anyway. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Can I?
I'm sorry, just for clarification.
Thank you.
Through the chair. Item 3, as in the third place recommended there, or you're referring to the recommendation itself?
States that where there's no objection, it will proceed without further reference to council. Well, they haven't received an objection because they've received the notification too late.
So, if I
it doesn't really matter. I mean, I don't really.
If I can
respond
through the chair, so the properties that have received that we are recommending go on to the heritage list, category 2 in this case. I believe 8 Swanbourne Street and 140 Sterling Highway. We have received objections from those, so naturally we wouldn't just simply include them at this time.
All right, so am I being asked to move this in parts, as in individual properties in part? Yeah, okay, good. Just checking. All right. Did you want me to move them separately, 1, 2 and 3, or just 3 separate? 1 and 2 together? Doesn't matter. I'm going to move them one at a time. Excellent. Councillor Lang.
It's more of a question on 7 Douglas Street. I've not been in there, but I'm very familiar with the place, and I've managed to. There's some images of the place online inside. It's got terrazzo floors, and you can see the structure of the building. It's got some bits added onto it, but it's pretty easy to see. Stripping those back, it's going to be a gorgeous cottage underneath all that. What was our assessment for one of the main reasons for taking it off?
Right. Just get the manager to pull that up. Pop your mic on, yeah.
Yeah, through the chair. Just going through the meeting attachments. So there is a brief report on 7 Douglas Street. So the existing statement of significance of the property on the heritage listing recommends removal in 2010 due to it being below the threshold and significantly altered. And the threshold there would be referring to the category 3 threshold.
Does that resolve the question?
It does resolve the question, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, councillors, any further questions or discussion? Councillor Sullivan?
Yeah, I'm also queried the Douglas Street one, and particularly given I think it was probably in that same 2010 process where number 8 over the road was taken off a list, or there was I think a demolition approval or whatever, and the staff said, yeah, it doesn't, it has no or little significance. And clearly the house over the road, number 8, is in much better condition in terms of being able to read what the original cottage was like. Why, for the life of me, that's not on the list or been put back on the list, I don't know. But I think number 7 is certainly not quite in that class, but I would still consider it to have some significance. And I am worried about the extent to which current thinking from our heritage experts is starting to drift away from the community perspective of what is heritage, to the point where if you can't absolutely see its heritage from the front, if it's been somehow masked, someone filled in the front veranda or grew a creeper across it almost, it no longer is heritage, when in fact, anyone will look at that cottage and go, underneath it is a similarly sweet cottage like the other ones in that street. And Douglas Street is a really precious little street. It's one of those streets which is kind of like Gold Street or whatever. It's a little narrow, quirky kind of environment. So it does worry me. I imagine even if it was on the list, there would still be great opportunity to do things with it. It's right next to a park that I helped establish. It's a great site. It doesn't mean that we, should just take 7 Douglas Street off the list because, people can't see its heritage from the street as you drive past. It's not as obvious. The same would be true at the end of Douglas Street, where the corner house, which I think was owned by the Catalanis at some stage. But anyway, that the corner house down there, covered in brickclad, is a significantly important Queen Anne building from my perspective. But it was almost like, well, you can't see that from the street, so we won't worry about it. So I worry about taking that one off. So if you move it separately, I would appreciate it.
Move that individual property separately? Is that possible? Yeah. I'm just checking from a procedural perspective how to deal with that.
Through the chair, my recommendation would be if you do want a little bit extra time on any of these properties, I would remove them, because then that means that there is no decision on that property in particular, and perhaps it's considered in another review. But we could absolutely take one out and consider it separately and make that a part 4.
Presumably, it's possible to defer one or two of them for further elected member, site visits, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Councillor Van Dawson.
Just a question: should we move the item first, like instead of? Does that get? So, do we vote on that separately? Whether we would want to include it, or like whether we would vote on the officer recommendation for that particular house tonight, or whether it gets deferred? Like.
Look, I mean, I'm struggling with the idea of a deferral because I'm trying to work out exactly what would happen during that deferral. The officers have done more than drive past, and I suspect have, done a piece of work that's unlikely to be changed by more time. I think if elected members were concerned that they hadn't had a chance to see it, then it was been in our agenda papers. So I guess, I'm happy to move individual properties one by one and let councillors vote on those individual listings. Should one not be supported, I guess we don't have an alternative on the table at the moment. So by nature, it's deferred for another decision, I suppose. Councillor Van Dawson.
Oh, and sorry, just to clarify, I would support the officer's recommendation and don't wish to defer, but yeah, just wanted to clarify.
Okay. So what are we doing? I'm moving 1 and then 2 by address individually, and any that are not approved, I think we'll need some reasons to instruct officers to do something. Councillor Archibald.
I was just going to ask, couldn't we just say that we would move all but the Stewart and Lloyd's building and whatever the Douglas Street number was?
There's only 4 of them.
Oh, sorry. Okay, don't worry. Ignore that.
I mean, just to... Okay, so I'm going to move part 1. All those... Oh, sorry, not move it. I'm going to put it to a vote. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. I'm going to move part 2, effectively A, 8 Swanbourne Street. Put that to a vote. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. B, Stewart and Lloyd. All those in favour? And against? Councillors Van Dawson and Graham against. That's carried. 100 Atfield Street. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. 7 Douglas Street. All those in favour? And against? And that's carried. Part 3. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you. That was surprisingly efficient after the discussion. Okay, so that's a decision tonight then. Councillors, I will invite you to have a look at your agenda. We've gone through all the items for which we have speakers. I do note that we still have an item, the Friends of Groups policy, where we've seen a couple of different amendments for that one. If I were to move 8, has everyone just got, can I grab your attention for a minute? Because I'm going to call out some numbers and some names of items, and I definitely need you all listening. Number 8, Staple Street, Council Item 8. Item 10, Heritage Review, South Rio Heritage Area. Item 11, Planning Information Report. 12, Meeting Procedures. 13, Verge Gardens. Accepting that there has been a lot of work by officers on a number of these things, and we would all like to acknowledge them for their hard work. Is there any item there that people would like to speak on specifically? Councillor Archibald? Yep, Verge Garden. So we'll... Yeah, I know the Friends of... Sorry, the Verge Garden one has an amendment. I don't have anything listed. Okay. Oh, that's... Sorry. Yeah, you're right. Okay. All right, so 8, 10, 11, 12. Are you moving that way on block? Seconded by Councillor Archibald. All those in favour? Okay, so Thompson and Archibald. Yep, unanimous. Okay, let's go to the Verge Garden. Did I do 12 in that? Oh, that was easy, wasn't it? Got me. Yes. Verge Garden policy. So does someone want to move that with the minor amendment that the officers have drafted? Yep. And seconded by Councillor... I got confused there. It was Councillor Graham, I think. Good. Do people want to speak on this item? Councillor Archibald?
Very briefly, it is reflected also in the Friends of Group policy, the same thing. It became apparent, and there was some discussion about some of this at the group meeting we had, and then I subsequently had a bit of discussion with when we got given the drafts about just being clear about what each of these policies would cover. And given some of the comment that was made by Councillor Lang as well, I worked with the manager for Parks this afternoon or this morning rather, and we came up with these 2 suggestions, which the manager for governance beautifully clarified and made much more succinct than we'd come up with. And so this is a result of that. So for the Verge Garden one, it just makes it very clear what we're covering here, and that's it really. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Archibald. All right. Any further discussion on this? We'd just like to acknowledge that a bunch of councillors put some extra time into this and into the Friends of policy with officers, and they're the better for it. And it's great that we challenge ourselves to meet where our community is on some of these issues that are deeply important to people in our community. All right, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Do I have a mover for the Friends of Groups policy, which might have a different name by the time we're finished here? Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Archibald. Did you wish to make any comment on this? Yep. So, and you're moving that with the minor amendment printed on the same page? Yep. Okay. Good. Councillor Lang, you did have a proposed amendment. Are you?
I do have a proposed amendment which kind of wasn't really meant to see the light of day. It was more about asking a question, which I don't know if we can put it on the screen, what my proposed amendment is, or was, or whatever. We've been
Not
back and
unless
forth.
you move it, I guess. I mean,
Oh, you
perhaps
can't
you
put it
could
on the
speak to the item generally and allude to what you were doing if you
So
perhaps didn't want to
the
move
intent
it.
of my amendment was to make the Friends policy a lot more simple. If you're a Friends group, you're wrapped up in the Friends policy. What we've ended up with now is Friends groups in the Verge Garden policy and Friends groups in the Friends of policy, which is confusing, I believe. And I have actually tried to explain it to people in the street, and they scratch their head a bit. So yeah, what we're looking at now is some Friends group go to the Verge Garden, some go to the Friends of policy, and the ones that land in the Friends of policy, they land there based on our definition of natural areas. And the question I've had for the last month is Clontarf Hill a natural area, and is Hollis Park a natural area? And no one has been able to respond.
Do we want to answer that as a question? I mean, are you asking that as a rhetorical or a question?
I'm a bit tired of asking it, to be honest.
Well, it's good for everyone else, I think. So do you want to comment on that, Ryan?
Through the chair. So I guess in the absence of a policy position on how we interact with Friends of groups, the support we can offer Cantonment Hill is quite limited. Clontarf Hill is quite limited. A portion of the site is road reserve, so we do have control, I guess, of a portion. The balance falls into main roads, easements and lots and other various sort of arrangements which we don't have direct control over. There's a statement in the policy around, with the permission of the landowner, the city can then support groups undertaking Friends of activities within those spaces. We don't have the written approval just yet off Main Roads WA, but we have been working with the Friends of Clontarf Hill to support them in getting that written approval. Main Roads haven't been able to, or have been unwilling to provide that because the land is in the process of being handed back to the Wajak Aboriginal Corporation, I believe, for ongoing land management. So we're trying to get some sort of interim support to get them through to that point. So the way the policy is written, it does actually give officers the ability to support that group more formally, pending the outcome of that support.
And just to clarify, we would consider Hollis Park, Clontarf Hill natural areas?
Correct, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Lang?
Thank you. I've just been seeking clarification on that because I know we're defining natural areas as, dominated by native vegetation that is managed for biodiversity and conservation. So I just wanted to check that definition if it met, if those groups were kept in that area. And also, my intent was just to wrap up all Friends groups under the one policy. But it's hasn't been quite so simple. So the silver lining is that now some Friends groups that weren't formally recognised by the city are now recognised under the Verge Garden policy, and I hope they can get assistance through that group, through that policy, and we'll leave it with the officers to split up the groups wherever they go.
And I guess the good news is these are policies and they can be reviewed if they're not working. So, all right, do we have further speakers on this one? All right, I'm going to put it to the vote. All those in favour? And against? Councillor Lang against, and that's carried. That brings us pretty much to the end of the agenda. We don't have any committee working group reports, statutory reports, motions of which previous notice have been given, urgent business, late items, confidential business. So I will declare the meeting closed at 9:42 p.m. Thank you.